At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops-Peters, and now part of the Justn family of podcasts. We got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, it is Justn Perri. He does absolutely amazing work over at Chalk Value Bets. We're going to be diving in on what he's all noticed this season, whether or not we have a big enough subset to really be able to make some generalizations for these teams, or if we want to see a little bit more, just taking a look at some of these matchups with regards to these events, these tournaments as well, and how big that is, trying to balance the short term and long term when you make your bets as well, because it is really, really one of the most difficult things to do as a bettor, to take a few losses but no long term. It might be able to come through / try to be able to get a short-term gain as well. So we're going to be diving in on those topics and so much more with Justn in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Black Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at @Junior_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Hopefully you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. We're going to be doing a little bit of a shorter recap from yesterday because the Greg Peterson experience on Visa was actually 4 hours yesterday, so I had to record this a little bit in advance. And full disclosure, with some of the games in the final segment, with things like the Battle for Atlantis, the ESPN Events Invitational, I did have to do a few of those game breakdowns prior to us knowing the exact matchups, which that's one of the toughest things with just this time of year trying to project forward. So I did my best to be able to present all aspects of those matchups and what we're going to be seeing out of all those teams, but forgive me if there's a little bit of line volatility, and for all the TBD matchups that might be a little bit more unclear on the podcast, I've got a VSiN link in the show notes to be able to help you guys out with my spreadsheet of every side and total that I'm looking at and my exact handicap. So I've got you guys covered there. Always have your back because we got to make some money on this Black Friday. But let's take a look back at everything that we did see from a tremendous Thanksgiving Thursday. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Saw quite a harebrained game between Florida Atlantic and Butler, as Florida Atlantic, they were able to get the win by kind of 91-86. This was a line that opened up with Florida Atlantic at 5. If you took the late 6-half with Butler, you were able to get there, as these two teams, they both shot north of 50% from the floor. You saw Butler go 9 of 19 from three-point range, as it really does look like they're a much improved offensive team, with Posh Alexander being able to give out 9 assists, 12 points. He did, though, have 4 turnovers, and for Florida Atlantic, this team just has such great balance. You had 7 different guys give you at least 8 points in this game. You were able to get 19 big ones out of Vladislav Golden, who's really been able to come into his own down low. I believe that they were without John Carlos Rosado in this game, but even without him, they were able to do a pretty solid job on the glass for Florida Atlantic. They win that battle 37-31 with regards to the boards. Big reason why they were able to shake off the loss of Bryant, and they were able to get it done in this one. Also being able to get it done in overtime, it was Villanova. They take down North Carolina by kind of 83-81 with Eric Dixon really being the main trigger man in this game. 34 points, 10 boards. Prior to this tournament, he had been a little bit lackadaisical in the first few games of the season. He was able to come through in droves. Now, for North Carolina, no shock, the top rebounder in this game was Armando Bacot. He was able to have 18 rebounds, but you can tell that the North Carolina backcourt, it does seem a little bit disjointed. Cormac Ryan has been shooting sub 30% from three-point range. He did have 18 points in this game on 12 shots, and RJ Davis, 23 points, but he had to take 22 shots to get there as well. For North Carolina, they lost the turnover battle 13-9, and always big in these sorts of games, free throw shooting. And it's a big reason why I do take Villanova in a lot of tight spreads. 32 of 36 at the free throw line, and Villanova, the last 2 seasons, has led the country in free throw shooting percentage. You did see quite a bit of an upset, as well as you saw Creighton go down to Colorado State, 69-48. You figured that Creighton was going to see a little bit of regression with their offense. Give a lot of credit to what Colorado State was able to do as well, but for Creighton, they go just 6 of 29 from three-point range. Ryan Kalkbrenner still had 12 points in this one, but for Colorado State, it was all about Isaiah Stevens being the best player out there on the floor in this game. He had 7 assists to 1 turnover, 20 points. He goes 2 of 3 from three-point range. Not like Colorado State put on a masterclass from distance as well, but they were actually able to do a very solid job on glass as well, winning that battle 43-34, and that's what we've been waiting for on this Colorado State team. And they bring in from Black Hills State College, Joel Scott, non-D1 transfer. He had 9 rebounds in this game. Colorado State has done a great job of being able to scour that non-Division I level to be able to bring in some talent. Looks like they've got a gem there. USC has a gem of their own in Boogie Ellis, 71-63. They were able to take down Seton Hall. As Seton Hall does look improved from a season ago, but they only had one guy coming off the bench for more than 8 minutes. That was Isaiah Coleman, and for Seton Hall, their guys just were unable to get it going from three-point range. Elamir Dawes, Dylan Adewusu went a combined 2 of 13 from three-point range. You did have Kadari Richmond chip in there 18 points, but for USC, all about what you were able to get out of Boogie Ellis, as he was able to have 22 points. And how about this from Josh Morgan? A old 10-block game where that's the only portion of a possible triple-double that he was able to fill up. He had 4 points, he had 2 rebounds, and 10 blocks with 6 turnovers. Just one of the most random stat lines I've ever seen in my life, but USC always does a solid job down low with regards to their rim protection defense, and that was certainly another example there. Things got very hairy if you bet on the Arizona versus Michigan State line, as Arizona, they closed as a 5.5-point favorite. They just barely covered, 74-68. The final. First time Arizona had been held below 75 all season long, as they went just 5 of 19 from three-point range. Clearly got slowed down a little bit by Michigan State, but they proved that in more of a half-court environment they're able to win as well. As Keshad Johnson, a nice double-double, 13 points, 10 boards, and for Michigan State, they need to find more scoring outside of Ty Walker. He had 18 points, but he had to take 20 shots in this one. AJ Hogard, just 2 assists, and for Michigan State, they took care of the ball. They only had 9 turnovers, but they also went just 5 of 17 from three-point range. Michigan State, a season ago, was number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage thus far this season. They just have not been that. And then for Iowa, they just are not the same team when they are on the road as compared to at home with regards to their offense. They are currently averaging, since the beginning of the 2022-23 season, about 21 points fewer per 100 possessions, one away from home than at home, and that took hold in this one. Oklahoma gets it done by a count of 79-67, as Iowa goes 4 of 23 from 3, 4 of 20 from Oklahoma, so that was quite glaring as well. And then we did see Memphis take down Arkansas 84-79 in a game that I felt like featured 2 very similar teams. You did have Arkansas go 7 of 18 from three-point range, but Arkansas loses a turnover battle 18-13. That's what doomed Michigan a few days ago. And for Memphis, how about David Jones? 36 big points. He's had a few triple-doubles in his career. Memphis, it feels like they're Noah's Ark. They've got 2 of everything. They get it done there. And then Iowa State, they were able to eke one out against VCU 68-64. First true test of the year for Iowa State. They got down double figures. They clawed their way back, as the man that was able to lead them back, Keshawn Gilbert, along with Taman Lipsby, both had 22 points apiece. Lipsby 7 boards, Gilbert 10 rebounds. And for Iowa State, they win the turnover battle 16-7. So old TJ Otzelberger and his style gets it done, and right now what's getting it done in college basketball is betting on favorites. Favorites hitting at 52.3% for the season. 422, 385, and 16 against the spread. I certainly think that'll taper off a little bit, and home underdogs are getting destroyed, by the way. We are going to see this turnaround. I tell you, we are going to see this turnaround. 79, 96, and 6 against the spread. Just wild, to say the least, but right now, the overs, they continue to cash. 415 overs. We have seen 399 unders, and along the way, I believe that we're now up to 8 or 9 pushes. Did have to leave this a little bit shorter with regards to a recap. I'm doing this as the games from Vegas have yet to tip off. We're still mid-game with like Boise State versus Virginia Tech, what have you, but hopefully you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hopefully you enjoyed 4 hours of the Greg Peterson experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. And coming up next, hopefully you enjoy our good friend Justn Perri. We're going to be taking a look at just what to make out of these tournaments that we've been handicapping, just how to use situational handicapping versus long-term handicapping as well, taking a look at a few teams that have been impressing us this season and trying to look for some regression spots as well. That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man, as Justn Perri. He does absolutely tremendous work over at Chalk Quality Bets, taking a look at this game that we all know and love. He does a great job of being able to do an impeccable job of taking a look at what we're seeing out there on the court and putting numbers behind it as well, being able to take a look at the quality of shots to be able to find advantages with regards to being able to gauge this game of college basketball. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X over at his first and last name, Justn Perri, and that last name is spelled Perri, and then the number 8 on the back half of that altogether. And Justn, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, it is always so much fun to come on the show and chat a little college basketball. It is, feast week. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, some college basketball, some football. It's a great time of the year. I'll say it a million times.
Oh, it is an amazing time of the year. And Justn, when it comes to being able to handicap these tournaments, because we've got a lot of them coming up for Friday and this weekend, and we had a lot of them last few days, how have you been taking a look at them? Because we do get a lot of unfamiliar environments, and I really do think that there's been a lot of money to be made in terms of gauging these totals involving teams that are playing out there in, like, for example, the Battle for Atlantis, and taking a look at those unders. That's something that has always boded very well for me. Taking a look at, say, the Maui Invitational, and the fact that it wasn't in Maui this year, and those unders was also something very big. How much you want to take a look at the environment itself and perhaps make a few adjustments to the way that you handicap the games, because I do think that that's a place where a lot of money can be made this time of year.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it can be unfamiliar. It's not really a gym a lot of sometimes at these places, especially like when they're hosting.
Battle for Atlantis.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're in a ballroom. And again, sight lines matter. The way it sort of feels to line up your shot against the backdrop matters. And these things are sort of at least considered in most arenas or home gyms for college basketball teams. But you get these other, venues, and they are not necessarily as, well prepared for that. And that's okay. It's part of the game. Both teams have to deal with it. But your goal is to try to dive into that and find something, or at least recognize it quickly and try to beat the market, beat the line. For me, whether it's totals, spreads, teams that look good or something, these tournaments, I feel like the benefit sometimes is like, what you see is kind of what you're getting. It's bang, bang, bang. Like you can have 3 games, 3 days, teams playing very often. And just how much is really going to change between one day to the next? Not much is the answer. Teams aren't practicing. There's no real way to prepare for your next opponent after you beat the first one. It's an interesting, opportunity to be like, okay, well, I know what I saw. I know what this team's trying to do, and I know who they're playing tomorrow, and I know what that team's trying to do. And they don't really have too much time to, counter balance each other or make sure their attacks are structured properly and their defenses are ready for what the opponent's bringing. So you can kind of just play the matchup game and be like, well, how's it going to work? Like, is this going to do better against what this team defends like? It's a solid opportunity to really dig your teeth into how, teams sort of will mesh or fail to mesh against each other. And maybe find an advantage on one side or the other.
Yeah, I do think that matchups are so important. As joining me on the show, we do have Justn Perri, who does amazing work over at Shot Quality Bets. And how much, when it comes to this time of year, do you want to take a look at a team that perhaps plays a little bit of a funkier style? Because one thing that I noticed was in what we saw a little bit earlier in the week, a team like a Stephen F. Austin, a team like a Tarleton State, that they play a ridiculous style of defense, something that these teams don't see all season long. That does cause things to go a little bit off the rails, and typically that plays in the advantage of a team that does play that more interesting, that more off-the-wall style. I'm not sure if that's an angle that you take or not with regards to this time of year, but I always think that that's a little bit of a focal point of mine.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity to get some interesting matchups, right? And to see, okay, like a team here is going to throw zone or press, or maybe, run specific like trapping action. And again, you have to understand, like, all right, well, if you're going to see a lot of traps, are they going to understand how to get out of that from the ball screen action, or are they going to successfully be able to force bad passes out of a trap when they come around on that ball side help? So there's so much nuance to it, and you can definitely get an edge by attacking it that way. I think, that is a little bit more in depth than what is really occurring when lines are set, right? That's not what's happening. There might be some models out there that can understand the abilities of teams and where their strengths are and how they're going to match up. And they definitely do take these things into account. But at the end of the day, you definitely have the advantage as the human to dig your teeth into the X's and O's in comparison to how these simulations take a look at it, because they're always going to sort of draw back to average efficiencies rather than your ability to pinpoint what's going to happen in that specific matchup and make a one-time prediction rather than a multiple occurrence, thousand of occurrence type of average guess.
Yeah, and I think that is so important to gauge, and it's so important to balance as well, because when you're placing a bet, you're placing a bet on that one particular game, how a team is going to be performing that one night. But as we know, unless if you're going to be placing bets for a day, or even I would say a week, if you're out in Las Vegas, if you're out in Atlantic City for a week, I certainly do think that your betting style is going to be a little bit different than if you are doing this day in and day out, because we all know this. If you bet enough, you're going to go through hot streaks, you're going to go through cold streaks, you're going to go through streaks of just general indifference. And I do think that it is very important to be keeping in mind trying to handicap that particular game and what you think is going to be profitable long term. And it's one of the most difficult things, in all honesty, in my opinion, to do.
It's definitely very difficult. There's no exact perfect science to it. You have to stay true to a method you trust. And I mean, for me with college basketball, the long term is it's really important to be able to zoom out. And, I personally play a lot of volume. I have a lot of picks every day. And I think for a lot of people, it can be a lot. But, there's so much, there's such an ultimate nature to only playing a couple picks, right? You hit a little bad streak of variance and you only play 2 or 3 plays a day. You can go a few days and you can really not see a winner or two. But you play 10 or 11 picks, you're going to get some winners. You're going to have a lot of data to dive into. You're going to start to understand where your edge is. In my opinion, I test out my hypothesis a lot, and that means that I get a lot of results. And there's really no better way to learn than to analyze results. I play a lot, even though I still sweat out every play, a mean sweat, I can't help it. But, I'm probably, I think, already at around 150 to 200 plays already, and we're about 3 weeks in. So I'm averaging something around, 10 plays a day on average. So the goal is just to try to come out of that closer to 55, 56% than 52, 51%. And that, I guess, keeps you sane, because you can, I guess, balance out the cruel losers and the picks where you just happen to choose the team that couldn't hit the wide side of the barn, or whatever the saying goes. It's just it's going to happen. You're going to choose a team that doesn't show up some days, and the other days you're going to choose a team who plays a team that doesn't show up. And you definitely need to be able to stay steady as both of those things happen. You don't want to get too full of yourself, too confident when you hit a pick that, maybe was lucky. And then you also don't want to get too down and like question yourself just because your team got blown out by 35 on a -2 line. Can it happen? Yeah. Does it mean it's a bad pick? Probably not. There's a lot that goes on in these college basketball games. There are definitely some bad picks, but a lot of times there's usually a lot of variance at play when you're dealing with shooting a ball into a hoop.
Yep, like every pick that I ever made on Tom Crean, that was always a bad pick. I'm able to say that, but you know what? You're so right on that because we are always results oriented. But as we know, there's a lot of things that go down in this great game of college basketball. Joining me on the show, we do have Justn Perri. He does absolutely amazing work over at Chalk Value Bets. Joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. Now, when it comes to the Friday slate, there are a few games that are off the board just due to the nature of these tournaments. You've got games that are going on Thursday, and those results, they do lead into what we get on Friday. And truth be told, we are recording this late Wednesday night. I did not want to make anyone have to work on Thanksgiving because everyone should be able to spend some time with friends and family. But that said, I do think that we've got a very interesting game that we know we're going to be getting on Friday between Alabama and Ohio State. This is a part of the Emerald Coast Classic. And I do want to get your thoughts on this game because with Alabama, I feel like a lot of people were down on them coming into the year, and I certainly did not think we would get the same Alabama that we did a season ago, but I thought that it was very interesting that people were really looking at this Alabama team so lowly, and they've been one of the teams I've been truly impressed with to begin the season.
They've done pretty well. I think they're one of the top teams in shot quality right now in terms of what we're looking at only a few games in. I think 8th right now in adjusted shot quality, so pretty good. They're definitely overperforming expectations. It's something I think shot quality is pretty clear on in terms of their results, but that's okay. That means they're playing really well. Their shot selection is 5th best in the nation. Their rim and 3 rate is really high, so like almost all their possessions are really valuable right now. And again, the shot making looks really good. Looks like they're going to be loaded with shooters again. It's a good thing for the Alabama college basketball program. They look great finishing at the rim. The half court sets are strong. That when they go into almost anything, they're getting what they want. ISO looks good. The off the dribble 3-pointers look good. The mid-range shots are valuable compared to the rest of the NCAA. It's really impressive to see. And, the defense has been solid, but it really looks like they're going to be an offensive powerhouse.
Yeah, it really does look like they're going to be as well. And I think the defense is better than it was 2 years ago. I'm not going to say that it's what it was last year where they were holding opponents to shooting like sub 25% from 3-point range. I just don't think that that's going to be duplicable. But that said, I've been very impressed by them as well as Justn Perri does amazing work over at Chalk Value Bets. Is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And as long as we do now have a little bit more of a sample size, I do think that now we're able to take a look at these teams and we know what we're getting out of them just a little bit more. I don't necessarily think that it's an end-all be-all at this point, but I do think that we're getting a good feel for these teams. How have you been evaluating these teams, and are there a few teams that you're a little bit more bullish/bearish on right now than you were perhaps towards the beginning part of the season?
I mean, I still think we're right at that cusp. I like to think that once we get out of November, you can start really trusting the data that you see coming out of the current performance. I mean, you're here at this little Thanksgiving period, and some teams still only have 3, maybe 4 games against Division I opponents. That's a little too few for me. I definitely like to get to that 6, 7, or 8 game sweet spot, especially with some of these teams in the non-con schedules. You can just cakewalk your way through. We're sitting here, like you mentioned, recording Wednesday night. This is going to be a very interesting result that I think, maybe the listeners can look at in hindsight. It's like this Pittsburgh versus Florida game where Pittsburgh has basically played no decent competition, now goes and plays Florida. I'm like, how does that work? How do you deal with that in your ratings? Because, the stats on Pittsburgh, if you're going to go look at their stats and they played nobody, all their stats look great. So, you want to definitely see how teams do against a wide range, way they develop offense against good and bad teams, because the idea is that you don't want to be in scenarios that you haven't seen before, or at least, can try to have some recognition of those games where a team's going into their toughest opponent of the year by far. That's a game I probably don't feel like I have enough data for to really attack. And that's why I didn't play that game, even though I did lean Florida. So really interesting to see how that one's going to go. Something my eyes on. I saw some really great stuff over the weekend with the Baha Mar tournament. I thought Miami looked really good. It's going to be another interesting season for them. Maui, Purdue just looks unstoppable again. I think it's just a question of if they can manage to not have the mice scare the elephant in March, and they should just be able to pound their way through. Obviously, UConn looked great at Madison Square Garden. College basketball's in a great place, and I think Marquette, still gave Purdue a run for their money, so I'm loving it. I think there's some really great teams forming. I was really impressed with how Memphis looked against Michigan. I'm excited. There's definitely, I think, a little bit more uncertainty for me in some of like the mid and low major conferences of how those are going to go. Some interesting contenders have definitely been bubbling up. Some of these teams can really play. Oakland looked really good in their MTE over the last couple of days. I think they actually won. So I think they beat that Marshall team. So pretty interesting seeing some of these powerhouses maybe start to pop up. Kennesaw looked interesting again. It's really college basketball season out here, Greg.
Yes, it truly is college basketball season, and we are all the better for it. Justin, you're doing such amazing work taking a look at this game that we all know and love. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
And what's on tap? More college basketball's on tap is really what's going to be on tap for the next 4 glorious months. But yeah, I think, just give us a follow over at Chalk Quality Bets. We have a free play of the day that's been doing really well. I, of course, have my own stuff that I do kind of independently from my job, which is with Shot Quality as the content and product lead. So if you're interested in that, I'm having a pretty good season, coming off a solid start, honestly. It's been really good, just trying to take a look at using expected data to sort of pinpoint recency bias and over evaluations of teams is kind of how I like to approach the game. Just sort of looking at buy low spots, sell high spots, trying to figure out where value really is. So you can give me a follow on the old Twitter. It's Justn Perri 8, and I'm on TikTok now too, and I have a really easy username over there. It's just at college basketball picks. So follow me over there, and you'll see me taking a stroll through the park.
I am surprised that handle was not taken. So good on you for being able to lock that one down, because typically it has to be, instead of like Greg Peterson, it's like Greg Peterson, Flappy Bob 707 or something like that. So nice job being able to get that handle, and a man that always has his finger on the pulse of college basketball, a man that does just such great work is Justin. It's always a pleasure to be able to get him aboard and pick his brain on this sport that we all know and love. A big thanks to Justin for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. It was absolutely tremendous to be able to get Justn Perri aboard. He does amazing work over at Shot Quality Bets, taking a look at this game that we all know and love, doing an amazing job of being able to put some numbers to what we're actually seeing with our own 2 eyeballs. He does such an amazing job being able to make sense of a game that sometimes is a little bit all over the place, and it is always a pleasure to get him aboard. A big thanks to Justin for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday, this Black Friday, as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_D1, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then from there it's sort of in order of tip time with regards to these events. Like the ESPN event is going to be one of the first ones up. The Battle for Atlantis, that's going to be towards the middle, and then you'll wrap things up with the Vegas Invitational. I will throw this in here right now because I did do a VSiN show from pretty much 11 p.m. Eastern time until 3 a.m. I did have to do this with some of the matchups for like the Battle for Atlantis, the Vegas Invitational, things like that being a bit TBD. So there's going to be a little bit of speculation there, and there might be a little bit of movement in terms of those numbers. I've got the VSiN spreadsheet link posted in the show notes, so that way you're able to see everything that might have changed from what I was taking a look at the day before. So that should be able to keep things all neat, clean, and easy. And let's get things started with 793, 794 on the betting board. It is Canisius, and they are going to be taking on Wofford. Wofford finds themselves as a favorite of between a pick'em to a 1.5 point favorite, and your total, that is 149. And I said Canisius as a 4.5 point favorite. I am not really feeling this Wofford team right now. The defenses went down the tubes last year. They were a bunch that was in the bottom 30 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and like the way that this Canisius team is trending. So I'm going to be taking a look at Canisius outright on the money line. This is also a game that's being played in the great country of Canada from Quebec. So this will be a little bit of a fun one, but with Canisius, they have a few new look pieces on this team, but they've all been able to fill in very well. Frank Mitchell has been able to do an amazing job with 11 points and a half boards, someone from the country of Canada. And then Jakob Fritz might be out of the fold, but his brother Yuri Fritz, he comes in 6'9", combo gentleman from the Netherlands. Not necessarily much of a scorer, but he's been able to give this team at 6'9", 5 boards, a block, a little bit over a steal, nearly 3 assists per contest. He just makes winning plays. And then Ty Stavosky is back from a season ago. He's been the main facilitator and also shooting 40% from 3 now. With Canisius, the 16.5 turnovers per contest is a little bit unsightly. They're shooting north of 40% from 3. That'll come down, but for Wofford, they have been very willing to give up the 3, and they themselves have a nice duo in the backcourt, Corey Tripp, Chase Cormier. These two guys have been able to average a little bit over 28 points per contest. With Cormier, he comes in from Northeastern, where a season ago, he's only averaging about 3.5 points per contest. I have my question marks if he's going to be able to keep this going long term. And for Wofford down low, you really don't have much other than Kyler Filewich. He's a 6'9" gentleman, actually from the country of Canada himself, so a little bit of a homecoming for him as well. 7 rebounds, about 9 points per contest, but I just am not buying in on this Wofford defense. It sounds like Canisius has been like super duper amazing on defense, but you know what? They've given up 71 points or fewer in 3 out of their 4 games thus far this season, lone exception being that season opener against Syracuse. Meanwhile, Wofford just night in and night out has been getting absolutely torched against E1 competition. They have yet to hold an opponent below 82. So interesting circumstance here. I did set my total at 144.5. I do think that both of these teams cool down a little bit with regards to their shooting. I do think that because this is being played in Canada, it's going to cause for some unfamiliar sight lines, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with Canisius taking them outright on the money line. 785, 796 on the betting board. Evansville and Chattanooga do battle. Chattanooga, the home team, between 7.5 and 8-point favorites. And your total on this game, you're going to be getting it between 141 and 142. It's at Chattanooga as a 7.5-point favorite. So now that we're getting 8, I'm going to be willing to dive in on this Evansville team that does look much better than they did a season ago. They've got some nice size with Justn Perri coming over from France. He has done an incredible job down low, being able to log right around about 6 boards, 13 points per contest. Not necessarily too much of a true shot blocker, but it's big because you've got a little bit more of a scoring combo player, Kenny Strawberry, who last season gave the team 14 points per contest. Does need to work on his 3-point shooting, but this team has been able to bring in some shooters to be able to help him out. Someone like a Cameron Hafner has come over from Eastern Illinois, where last season he shot about 42.5% for 3. He's shooting 40% thus far this season, so that's encouraging for an Evansville team that you can tell that they were very much bare bones this season ago, and now they actually have some depth that they're able to rely upon. Flip side, for the Chattanooga team, you do have to love the way that Hunter Huff has been able to come back for the team. Was denied eligibility a season ago after playing for this coaching staff, and Dan Earl 2 seasons ago at VMI has become the team's top scorer with 16.5 points per contest. But Chattanooga is a team that they're going to give up their open buckets, but they need to knock down their open threes. Right now, they're only shooting 30% per 3. I think that is going to be heating up a little bit. You bring in someone versatile in Jan Zadek. He is pretty much going to be the replacement of Jackson Stevens, a 7-footer that was able to be Mr. Do-It-All. And for Zadecki, shooting 39% per 3 with 14.5 points per contest. Not really giving you a lot down low. It has been Sam Alexis who has been tremendous down low. 12 rebounds per game, but really you're not getting a lot outside of that. And this is a little bit of a top-heavy Chattanooga team. You've got 5 guys who are giving you north of 9 points per contest, and then off the bench, you got 1 guy giving you north of 2.5 points per contest. Noah Melson, who comes over as a true freshman, has been able to give you about 4.5 points per game. So that depth does worry me a little bit. Evansville, they've been able to show some nice depth. And for Evansville, they've gotten to at least 72 points in every game thus far this season. That's been quite impressive. Meanwhile, Chattanooga has actually been much better on the defensive side of things as well. Last year it was Evansville who couldn't score, and it was Chattanooga who was very good on offense, but they couldn't play any defense. So a little bit of role reversal here. I did set my total at a 141.5. Personally, between 141 and 142, I would rather take the 141 over, and that was the opener in this game. So going to be taking a look at the over because I do think that we might have a game close enough for some late game fouling. So going to be taking a look at that over. And with Chattanooga, made them a 7.5 point favorite, so I'd 8 or more taking the points. With Evansville, 797, 798 on the betting board is my DK Network right pick. It is Monmouth, and they're going to be playing against Belmont. This is from the Palestra. Belmont opens up a 4-point favorite. They're now between 4.5 and 5-point favorites. Totals between 154.5 and 156.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I set my total at a 149, and part of the reason why I'm going to be taking a look at the under is the basis of my DK Network right pick. I set Belmont as a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. With Belmont, this team year in and year out is one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, each out of the last 6 seasons, this team has ranked in the top 24 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. They've been a little bit rough on the glass, but if you take a look at their numbers, they're currently 348th in the country in terms of rebound rate against C1 competition. Well, that is because they played against Furman and Arizona on the road to really warp their numbers, and Monmouth, I recognize that they haven't played some sort of a cupcake schedule either. Playing against Lehigh, Princeton, West Virginia, George Mason certainly is not easy to say the least, but they're right now about 275th, so that Achilles heel of Belmont is not necessarily going to be unearthed, and I do think that for Belmont, they're going to be able to get a good just showing in general out of the backcourt. Keyshawn Davidson, he was last year a very nice facilitator for this team, and thus far this season, he's still been able to give out 3.5 assists per contest, but after he was logging about 8.5 points per game last season, only about 5.5 this season, and he works really well with Jacoby Gillespie, who he a season ago had about 3.5 assists per contest. He's up to 4 per game thus far this season, but you bring back Cade Tyson, who last year had 6'8", shot north of 40% from 3, 14 plus points per contest, and the Vanderbilt transfer in Malik Dia. He has made some great strides as well, 17 points, 6.5 boards, going up against a Monmouth team that a season ago, they were in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They were 360th in 3-point shooting percentage, and now they're shooting 41.9% from 3-point range. I do believe that they're very much improved with their 3-point shooting percentage from a season ago. Biggest the reason why you bring in Xander Rice. He is the son of King Rice, and he, while he was over at Bucknell a season ago, shot in the high 30s from 3, logged 14 points per contest. He elevates a backcourt that a season ago was just absolutely awful at being able to put the ball in the basket, but right now for Monmouth, you've got 3 guys who are averaging north of 5.5 points per contest. Jack Collins has been solid after he a season ago was a nice player. A season ago, didn't shoot it well from 3, but had like 10 points, 2 steals, 4 boards, a little bit of a mixer and a shaker for the team, and been able to get a lot down low out of Nikita Katsatanovsky. Hopefully I said that correctly, with about 8 boards per contest. But for Monmouth, you very much have limited scoring options with this team. There's no way, in my opinion, that they're going to continue to shoot 42% from 3-point range. And for this Monmouth team, they've been getting lit up down low as well. This Belmont team does a good job of being able to knife in and get 2-point buckets. I think that this is a bad matchup for Monmouth, and I do think that Monmouth is going to be seeing quite a bit of Coolidge with regards to their scoring. So my DK Network right pick, that is laying the points with Belmont. Set them as a 9-point favorite, and along those lines as well, going to be taking a look at the under. 799, 800 on the betting board. It is UConn. They play out Manhattan. Manhattan is a underdog of 32.5 to 33 points. Totals between 139 and 140. I did set my total just a little bit north of a 140, more around a 143.5, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Even with Stephon Castle out of the fold, this UConn team has been absolutely tremendous in darn near every facet of basketball. You currently don't have Donovan Clingan up to being able to play like 30 plus minutes or anything like that, but he has been effective in the minutes that he has been playing, and Alex Karaban really goes under the radar. He's actually been leading the team in scoring. 6'8", do-it-all player that is currently shooting about 49% from 3, able to haul in there right around 6 boards per contest. He's been a mainstay, and then how about the way that Tristan Newton has become so versatile as well. He and Cam Spencer are combining for about 31 points and 10 assists between the two of them. Newton is pulling in their 7.5 boards. You've got Spencer shooting 43% from 3-point range. You've got some relatively solid depth with someone like Hassan Diarra being able to give you just a little bit of scoring. Solomon Ball has come in as a freshman. He's been able to produce about 7 points per contest. I think that he's going to be able to give the team a little bit more 3-point shooting moving forward. And we saw Manhattan in a sub-big game a little bit earlier this season against Kansas. They got completely dump trucked in that game, 99-61, and there's no reason to really think otherwise in this one. You've been able to get good production on the freshman and Sidhu Traore, who's been able to log 15.5 14.5 points, 10.5 boards, but his team loses darn near everything from last year. John Gallagher comes in and he brought someone like Briggs McLean with him, who was the top scorer at Hartford, but the top scorer at Hartford has resulted in giving this team as many points as myself. He has scored 0 points thus far in his Manhattan career. You've got like Perry Cohen, who comes over from Brown, where he was a little bit of a reserve. He's been able to chip in there 7 points per contest, career about 32% three-point shooter, but for Manhattan, it's just very sloppy right now. 14 turnovers per game. They're shooting below 30% from three-point range. It's very, very clear that they don't have the size to be able to match up with this UConn team. I think that this is going to be quite a bit of a bludgeoning, and we have seen big favorites do a really good job of covering this far this season. So it is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Don't want to be laying really anything more than a 33. I set my number at a 33.5, but going to be willing to lay it in. I do think that UConn going to be able to put up a nice offensive expose in this one to be able to push this total over. So looking at the over and going to be willing to lay up to 33 with UConn. 801, 802 on the betting board. This is from Henderson, Nevada, as you've got Indiana State and Toledo doing battle. Toledo is between a 2 to a 2.5 point underdog. So this game is anywhere between 165 and 166. And with the Sycamores, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. Being able to get the hook on 2, that is my buy point on Toledo. This Toledo team still very dangerous, even though they do lose quite a few pieces from a season ago. For the Toledo team, they are very much going to be relying upon the leaps from Tyler Cochran, who he was out for much of the season last year, but has been able to do a solid job of being able to chip in there some three-point shooting and some overall versatility, as he has logged thus far this season right around 7.5 points, 2.5 assists, 2.5 steals, in the neighborhood about 4 boards per contest. So I like what he's able to bring to the table, but really your two main scorers are 2 guys returning from a season ago, Dante Maddox and Raheem Moss. Moss has been able to give you 3 assists, 17.5 points per contest, and Maddox is really your main three-point shooter, shooting 43% from 3. And Toledo as a whole, they're shooting 43% from 3, which typically is unsustainable, but we saw last year with Toledo. They shot 39.5% from 3 on fewer than 10 turnovers per game while being an up-tempo team. It's just absolutely ridiculous the way this team runs. Now, with this Toledo team, they also do have a situation where they have a tough time being able to play some defense, but it does feel like with Cochran, they are going to be able to play just a tad bit more defense. And Indiana State was a legitimate top 80 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. Now, they have been getting blowtorched thus far, giving up at least 80 points in 3 out of their last 4 games, with the IUPUI game falling on 57. But I do like what Robbie Avila is bringing to the table. He's a nice combo player that's leading the team in darn near every major category. 20.5 points, 6.5 boards, 5.5 assists as a 6'10" sort of point forward. You've got someone like Xavier Bledson, who's able to give you about 5 assists per game as well. Julian Larry, he throughout his career has been a very solid three-point shooter, making 46.5% of his triples a season ago, and Indiana State is shooting 42.5% from 3. Now, I'm a believer that we should see things dial back just a little bit. These are 2 really good shooting teams. Both of these teams aren't going to shoot north of 42% when it's all said and done, though, as well. So I do think that this total is just a little bit high, especially with these teams playing game number 3 in 4 days. They did get off for Thanksgiving, but they've been playing a lot of basketball. I do think that for Indiana State, they have a little bit more with regards to Robbie Avila being that main point forward, but I do like the Toledo style as well. I do think that they've got just a little bit more in the backcourt as well, though Indiana State has a little bit more depth. So being able to get the hook on 2, I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Toledo, and with my total, set mine at a 162. I do think that both of these teams going to start to slip up a little bit in terms of their shooting. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take 2.5 or more with Toledo. 803, 804 on the betting board. It is Utah Tech, and they're going to be playing on the road against Washington State. Washington State between a 14 to a 14.5 point favorite, and your total is anywhere between 140.5 and 141.5. With Washington State, I did set them as a favorite of 16 points. I am going to be willing to lay this number with Washington State. Has been a squad that has been trying to be able to find their identity after last season. They lost a lot of their top pieces, and now for Washington State, really, with your top 4 scorers from last year gone, you have to rely upon the Idaho transfer in Isaac Jones, who put up great numbers at Idaho last year. 19.5 points, 7.8 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table, but Utah Tech is another team that's in transition. They lose 4 of their top 5 scorers from the season ago as well. Tanner Christensen, the main holdover from last season, has been able to give you about 9.5 points, 7 boards, and is a mid-30s three-point shooter. And for Utah Tech, overall, they're shooting 37% from three after a season ago. They were one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. I foresee a fall-off coming. Beon Riley, he comes in from Hawaii, where he was a little bit of an afterthought for the team, was a career less than 25% three-point shooter a few seasons ago, and currently is shooting 80% from three-point range. That is certainly going to be falling off a little bit. And for Utah Tech, you're looking at Nolan Gonsalves being one of the main holdovers. He's been able to give you about 8 points per contest, but you've got a Utah Tech team that really doesn't have a lot of depth. Right now, they're throwing out their 6 guys that are playing 20-plus minutes, and nobody else that has played in north of 2 games is seeing north of 8.5 minutes per game. They have no depth whatsoever, and that's going to be playing in favor of a Washington State team that, while they do have moving pieces, you've got Andre Yagmovsky, 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and I do think that Joseph Yusufu has some upside as well. Was glued to the bench the last few seasons at Kansas. When he was featured at Drake, though, during the 2020-21 season, was a 13-point per game scorer that was able to shoot 38% from three-point range. I think that he's a nice wild card for a Washington State team that they typically like to play relatively slow and controlled. You've got a Utah Tech team that they don't have quite the same three-point shooting that they did a season ago, but this is also a Utah Tech team that, if we're going to call it what it is, this bunch has been suspect with their defense last few seasons, to say the least. So it is a spot where I did set my line at 16. I am going to be willing to lay the number with Washington State, and in terms of the total, set mine at a 144. So going to be taking a look at the over. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Washington State. 805-806 on the betting board. UTSA, meet for the San Antonio Roadrunners. They play host to Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State is a point favorite, and your total on this game are between 142.5 and 143.5. With UTSA, I actually did set them as a 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line with Jacksonville State. This team has been really rough with their defense the last few seasons. Last year, they were outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and now they have to go up against a UTSA team that they are pretty gutted from last season, but they do have some versatility, and Dre Fuller has been able to give you 12.5 points, 6.5 boards, currently shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range after missing the entirety of the 2022-23 season. Prior to that, he was sort of a part-time starter over at Central Florida, so I do think that he's going to be able to yield some good results for this team. And then for Jacksonville State, down low is really where they're going to need to make their hay. You've got Juwan Purdue, coupled with Marcellus Brigham Jr. These two guys are combining for a little bit over 12 rebounds per game. And Kai Tandy, he has been impressive coming over from Xavier, chipping in there 16.5 points per contest, but not necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooter. The Lipscomb transfer in Quincy Clark has had the ball in his hands quite a bit after he was never really too much of a facilitator, and that has resulted in Jacksonville State being disjointed on offense. 16 turnovers per game. That has been quite unsightly. Meanwhile, for UTSA, got a lot of size down low. Clinton Lingard, he's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest. He's been able to get 7.5 rebounds out of Trey Edmonds, who comes in from Utah Tech, and while he was at Utah Tech, really wasn't too much of a three-point shooter, so don't have a lot of versatility there in UTSA as a whole. Only shooting about 30% from three-point range, but because this team knows what they are taking better care of the ball. They are only turning it over about 10.5 times per contest, with Christian Tucker being the main floor general. 6 assists per game. He's been in this UTSA system for the last few seasons, and while he didn't do anything amazing a season ago, at the very least, he knows the offense. He knows not to just completely give the ball away, and I think that that's going to be the big key for UTSA. You've got a little bit more three-point shooting ability with regards to Jacksonville State, but you also have just more limitations in general, and I do think that UTSA gets the job done here. So I'm going to be taking a look at them outright on the money line. Did set my total at 143. Neither of these teams really crank up their tempo, though UTSA has been playing a bit faster this year. I think that's a little bit more of a product of the competition, but I think that this could be close enough for some late game fouling, and Jacksonville State certainly does give up the 3 ball themselves. So here to 142.5, looking at the over to go along with the UTSA outright on the money line. 807, 808 on the betting board. It is Davidson, and they're going to be on the road playing against St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a favorite of 8 points with your total between 120.5 and 121.5. I did set my total at 127.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. The St. Mary's offense has been brutal to begin the season. I still have a feeling that this is a bit of a small sample size and things are going to rebound. St. Mary's last season was actually quite good with their offense. I fully recognize that they are in a funk to where They have scored 57 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. For St. Mary's, they're currently shooting 26% from 3. They aren't going to continue to shoot 26% from 3-point range. I lean on the team being able to just pick it up a little bit now. They were bad at the free throw line last season, and they're bad this year, shooting about 64.9% in the charity stripe. So that is something that you want to be taking note of. But Aiden Mahaney, season ago, he was able to give the team 14 points, shooting 40% from 3, and he's done much of that this year with about 13 points per contest. The 3-point shooting is down, but he's been solid. The big key is being able to get guys like Alex Dusas, Mitchell Saxon and company to be able to give him some help. With Saxon, he's been able to log about 9.5 points, 8.5 boards, a little bit over a block per contest, and this has still been a pretty stifling St. Mary's defense, and they go up against a Davidson team that they themselves have been a little bit up and down in regards to their production against C1 competition. They have yet to be able to break the 70-point plateau, but that said, this is a bunch of, they've been very close on a lot of occasions. They have yet to score fewer than 64 points, so it's not like they've completely bottomed out. They've been looking at a lot of mix and match pieces because Foster Laurier and Sam Menenga from a season ago are gone, so they've been looking at really a whole is greater than sum of its parts approach with 4 separate guys and Bobby Dirk and David Skogman, Connor Kachar, and Reed Bailey, all being able to log between 9.8 and 10.8 points per contest. You've got Bailey, Grant Huffman, Skogman, all these guys being able to give you between 5.5 and 6.5 rebounds per game, with Sean Logan being able to chip in there right around 5 boards per game as well for Davidson. They're shooting about 33% from 3-point range, and when it comes to the St. Mary's team, I do think that they're going to be able to do a good job of cutting that off, but I do think that for St. Mary's, what is going to be really the key is being able to hold up down low, and I think that they're going to be able to do so, but I do like the way that the Davidson backcourt has been able to come together. They've been able to keep things relatively clean, and for the Davidson team, they've got a little bit more depth than a season ago with some of these guys being able to step up in an unexpected way. You've got Angelo Breezy being able to chip in their 8.5 points after he was an afterthought at Villanova, so I do think that's going to be tough for St. Mary's to be able to cover this sort of a number. I set mine at 7, so being able to catch 8, going to be taking a look at the points with a Davidson team that has a win on their ledger against Maryland, and they held very close against Clemson. And with regards to this total, taking a look at the over, I think that this is a good buy low spot on that. So by total 127.5, 809-810 on the betting board. It is Houston, and they're going to be playing against Montana. Montana is an underdog of between 23.5 and 24 points with your total at 132. Montana typically is one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, and we all know that Houston is not going to be running it and gunning it, and we know that this Houston defense, it is going to be stifling. So as a result, I did set my total at 125. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. You've got a Grizzlies team that is looking at a pair of guys in the backcourt to really be able to maneuver everything. Aiden Moody, he's been able to give you 18 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and then Brandon Whitney, he's been able to do a solid job of being able to give you 3 assists, and is currently shooting 66% from 3. That'll be coming down quite a bit. To the credit of Montana, only about 9.5 turnovers per game, but they don't have a ton of size down low. You've got Deshaun Thomas along with Lau. Okay, he's been able to combine for about 12 rebounds per contest. Past that, nobody else is really giving you north of 4 boards per game. It's a team without necessarily a ton of depth as well. And for Houston, you've got so many guys that are able to come at you in waves. Right now, I believe that they've got 10 separate guys that are logging at least 10 minutes per contest. You've got LJ Cryer who's become that designated 3-point shooter for this team, and Jamal Shed, who's just so efficient with the ball and impacts the game in so many different ways. 8.5 points, 6 assists, 3 steals, plays tremendous defense, does a great job of being able to find guys like Damian Dunn in space to be able to pop some threes. Emmanuel Sharp has some good versatility. Juwan Roberts absolutely cleans up the glass at Houston year in and year out. They're one of the top rebounding teams in all of college basketball year in and year out. Montana, they have a very difficult time of being able to get second chances as well. It's a Houston team that's just pounded teams into oblivion. They have played 6 games thus far this season. They have yet to allow a single team to get north of 66 points. And as a matter of fact, they've allowed more than 55 once, and that was to a relatively solid Utah team. So I don't think that Montana is going to be able to get a whole heck of a lot going. I don't think that Houston is going to be just cranking it up and scoring like 90 points themselves. So I did set my total at 125. I do think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. And with Houston, wouldn't want to be laying anything more than 24.5. Set my line at 25, but here at 23.5 to 24, going to be one to lay the number. Houston throughout their just college basketball lives as favorites of north of 20 points. They have covered north of 2/3 of those games. So going to be taking a look at Houston laying the number and the under 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. This is also out from Henderson, Nevada. UC Irvine and Rice do battle. We give our to Lane Kiffin go Owls as Rice is between a 9 to a 10 point underdog between 150.5 and 151.5 is your total. And with UC Irvine, I did set them as 8.5 point favorites. Being able to catch north of 9, I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Rice. With the Rice Owls, they have a very versatile player in Max Fiedler that I think is going to be able to make a big impact on this game. At right around 6'10", he's been able to do a tremendous job being able to chip in there about 8.5 boards. He leads the team with 4.8 assists per game. Not a guy that's going to go out there and pop threes. He's going to be leaving that to the likes of Travis Evie and company. And not out about losing Quincy Oliveri via the transfer portal has been rough for the team. As currently they're only shooting about 34% from the outside, but you've been able to get some good versatility as well. The same Elajiki, who comes in from Cal, where last season he shot 36% from 3 with 6 points per contest as a 6'7", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of player. Meanwhile, for UC Irvine, this team has cranked up their tempo from past years. Typically, this was a team prior to last year that they would play low, slow, and under control, but this team has now been able to break the 70-point plateau in each of their last 5 games. They still do a good job of pounding teams into oblivion with their defense because they've got so many guys with size. They're able to do a good job on the glass. Now, Bent Lutken has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. We have yet to see him out here in Henderson, but even with him out of the fold, you still have tremendous size with Devin Tills, a 6'6" combo player, logging 6.5 boards, 12.5 points. He's been able to shoot 40% from three-point range, and it has been the key for Irvine going up tempo, having a good, reliable point guard like Pierre Cockrell. 5.3 assists to 2 turnovers per game. He's actually in his own right a relatively solid shooter, but he just chooses not to. He's only been able to give the team right around 5 points per contest. You would rather find someone like Andre 3000 Henry to be able to give this team some production, as he's been someone that has been shooting 47.5% from 3 this year now. It's a career less than 30% three-point shooter. I do think that we're going to see a little bit of a fall off there. And for Rice, what has always been the Achilles heel of this team is their defense. They've given up 80-plus points against every Division I team that they have played, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit more defense-oriented. I don't think that you're going to be seeing like a supreme amount of defense, but I did set my total at a 150.5, so here at a 151.5, I'm going to be diving in on the under. I do think that the versatility of Max Fiedler, even for a defense like UC Irvine, it's going to be tough for them to overcome, so going to be willing to take the points with Rice needing at least 9 or more with them, and going to be taking a look at the under. 8-13, 8-14 on the betting board. Duke is going to be playing against Southern Indiana. Duke at Cameron Indoor is a 33.5 point favorite, and your total is between 145.5 and 146.5. Set my line at 32. I think Duke wins, and I think Duke wins pretty big. I think we're just laying a point or two too many with them at this point with Southern Indiana. They do bring back Jeremiah Hernandez, who's been able to do a nice job giving the team 12 points per contest. He's the only guy back from a season ago that really logged north of 3 points per contest, and a season ago was about a 40% three-point shooter. You've had A.J. Smith come in and do a nice job of holding it down on the glass. 6'6", do-it-all sort of player that has been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. Don't know how that's going to match up with Kyle Filipowski, who's at 7 feet tall. Just should be able to maul in this game. 18.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's now shooting 40% from three-point range, and Duke has been quite efficient. Fewer than 10 turnovers per contest. A lot of that thanks to Therese Proctor. Proctor is giving out 5.4 assists to 0.8 turnovers per game. That is a masterclass in terms of efficiency. Ryan Young has been able to do a nice job chipping in there some rebounds. Now, this team does need to figure out what they've got a little bit more in the backcourt. You need to be figuring out how the freshmen like Caleb Foster, Jared McCain are going to be playing in tandem with Jeremy Roach and Proctor, but right now it's looking pretty good for this team. Meanwhile, for Southern Indiana, I do think that they are going to be able to get a little bit of unexpected production from some of their big men. You've got some like a Jack Champion in the backcourt who's been able to give you 4.5 assists per contest and has been that main ball handler. Meanwhile, Noah Caldwell, he's 6'11". He's come in and he's been able to give the team right around 5.5 rebounds per game after he was over at Tennessee Tech a season ago. I do think that for Southern Indiana, they're going to have a very tough time on the glass. And I do think that for Southern Indiana, a team that shot very well from 3 and is now shooting 29% from 3, it is going to be a long season for them, especially offensively, but I think we went just a little bit too far with this number. I set my line at 32, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern Indiana. In terms of the total, I set my total more around at 148. Southern Indiana has been, since they joined the Division I ranks, a bottom 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So looking at the over, and going to be willing to take the points with Southern Indiana. 8-15, 8-16 on the betting board. New Mexico and Pepperdine do battle from the Dollar Loan Center in Henderson, and with New Mexico, they're a 9 9-point favorite, and your total is between 157.5 and 158.5. With Pepperdine, I set them as underdogs of 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. New Mexico still dealing with the injury to Jalen House, which has hampered them a little bit, though. Out here in the Dollar Loan Center sort of event, I think it's like Ball Dogs Classic or something. They have been able to have Jamal Mashburn Jr. do a superb job for this team, as he has been the main scorer thus far this season. He has been able to chip in there. He combined 40 points in these last two contests. You've also been able to have Donovan Dent really step up as that main floor general. With House out of the fold, he's had to have the ball in his hands quite a bit, and he's been quite good. 6.8 assists and 2 turnovers per game. New Mexico, despite the fact that they play up-tempo and fast, they only turn the ball over 10.5 times per game, and they've been able to be so very crisp with their offense, despite shooting just 30.5% from three-point range. I do think that you're going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Mr. Toppin and JT Toppin. I don't know if that's any relation to Obi and all those guys, but he's been able to shoot 74% from the floor. He and Ellie Jr. Joseph combining for about 16 rebounds per game, but for Pepperdine, Michael Ajay has really been able to step up, shooting 54% from three. A non-Division I transfer from old Kent, Washington. He's been just absolutely tremendous recently, 16-plus points in 4 out of his last 5 games. He pairs in tandem with Houston Mallett, who's been able to log about 20 points per contest. It's Pepperdine team as a whole shooting 36% from three-point range, and they're another team that is really looking to push the tempo, but I did set my total just a little bit lower. We have seen this Pepperdine team play a little bit more defense. Now, granted, in the game against Indiana State, giving up 90 points there, that was a little bit less than terrific, but the defensive performance, it feels like has been a skoge a bit better with the team, and New Mexico is coming off of giving up just 56 points against Rice, so I actually give a little bit of credit where credit is due, as both of these teams have been a little bit all over the place in terms of their results. I do think that both do a good enough job of being able to guard the arc to be able to keep this game under, and I do think that Pepperdine going to be able to do a solid job on the glass. So it is a spot where at 7 or more, I'm going to be taking a look at the Waves, and here with this total, going to be taking a look at the underset line at a 154.5, 817, 818 on the betting board. Dayton is going to be playing us at Youngstown St. Youngstown St finds themselves as underdogs of 13.5 points, and your total is anywhere between 138.5 and 140, and with Youngstown St, I did set them as an underdog of 10.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take these points with Dayton. They are still dealing with the injury to Malachi Smith that has costed him his season, and it's just really sad to see, to say the least, because with Malachi Smith, you figured that he was going to be the main floor general for this team, and it's come to not be for him and for the Dayton team. We've got still quite a few guys that are going to be able to win the battle down low. Deron Holmes being the main of them. He's been able to log about 16 points in the neighborhood, about 6 boards. He's able to pop some threes. But how about what you've been able to get as well out of Nate Santos? He comes in from Pittsburgh, was a little bit of an afterthought there, and he's been able to do a nice job, logging about 7.5 rebounds per game. Enoch Cheeks, he's just a do-it-all player that a season ago when he was over at Robert Morris, he was just a stat sheet sufferer with like 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a block, a steal per contest. So he's got a nice just tool bag to be able to help out this Dayton team. Flip side for Youngstown St, you're going to be relying upon Brandon Rush to keep you in the game, as he's the main scorer from a season ago. He's been able to give the team 13.5 points per contest, and for Youngstown St, they've just been unseasonably cold with their three-point shooting. Last season, Youngstown St was a top 15 team in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. They did lose a lot of their guys that allowed them to be about a 36.8% three-point shooting team, but you know, have a little bit more down low with DJ Turn It Up Burns. He's been able to give you about 8 boards per contest. I like the overall game of Ziggy Reed as well. He comes in from Merrimack. While he was over at Merrimack a season ago, was able to log a steal, 4 boards, 14 points per game, and he had 6'6", was able to let it fly from three-point range. It is a Dayton team that does a very solid job with their defense. They're one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, for Youngstown St, though they were very efficient on offense and played high-scoring games last year, it's not like they necessarily pushed the tempo as well. So it's a very interesting spot in terms of total. I set mine more around a 136.5 as a result, so I'm going to be diving in on the under. I do think that Youngstown St gets a little bit more going from 3, and I do think that the Dayton offense moving forward might be just a little bit discombobulated with that injury to Malachi Smith. So going to be taking a look at the points with Youngstown St and the under. 819, 820 on the betting board. It is Kentucky. They play us a Marshall. Marshall, a 17.5 to an 18-point underdog. Totals between 155.5 and 157.5. With Marshall, I did set them as an underdog of 17 points. So being able to get that hook on 17.5 / being able to get the 18, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Marshall. It's a squad that's in quite a bit of transition. Last season, you were able to have Micah Hanglon do a very good job down low. Tavion Kinsey, Andrew Taylor, they were combining for right around 40 points per contest. And now you have to look at Kevon Voles along with Camden Kerfman to be your main two scorers who they've been able to put the ball in the basket. These two guys, they're currently combining for in the realm of about 26.5 points per contest. Kerfman last season shot in the high 30s from three-point range. That has fallen to about 30% from three. And for Marshall, they have been all over the place with their three-point shooting over the last few seasons. 2 years ago, they were just brutally bad from three at about 30%. Last season, they shot more around 34%. I don't think that they're as bad as their 24.5% three-point shooting. They might very well be well below average, but I do think that they should be able to see a rise there. And they are also dealing with an injury to Obiana Onchele-Killian. I still remember non-conference play 2 seasons ago. He was averaging right around 4 blocks per contest, but you've been able to have Nate Martin, the Texas State transfer, be able to step up with right around 9.5 rebounds per game, and he goes up against a Kentucky front line that has no shortage of shot size. They could use Aaron Bradshaw back in the full, but he had a double-double out of Abdou Thiero in that game in the Champions Classic a few weeks ago. 8.5 points, 7.5 boards out of him. You've had Robert Dillingham become a just stat sheet sufferer. He and Antonio Reeves really have been able to do a nice job with that regard. A combined 34 points, 9.5 boards between the two of them. Dillingham, about 4.5 assists, 1.6 steals per game, and that has been impressive with this Kentucky team as well. They're taking the ball away much more than they did a season ago. Just 8 turnovers per contest, 10 steals per game, shooting 39.5% from three. I do think that this is going to taper off a little bit, and one of the just hallmarks of Marshall is always being able to generate those steals. Kevon Voles, who comes over from Maryland Eastern Shore, he was one of the best at being able to pickpocket in mid-major college basketball last season. He's been able to chip in there 2.6 steals per contest, and I do think that that is going to disrupt this Kentucky team just a little bit. And for Kentucky, it is a squad coming off of a very, very tough game against St. Joe's, in which that game went to overtime, and they were able to just barely squeak by. Kentucky has been doing much more with their offense thus far this season, but I do think that this has gone a little bit too far, as Marshall last season was a top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So it is a spot where I did set my total at a 153. You're at between about a 155.5 to a 157.5, diving under, and going to be willing to take the points with Marshall. 821, 822 on the betting board. It is Western Kentucky, and they're going to be playing against Bowling Green. This is out in the great country of Canada. With Bowling Green, they are between 4.5 and 5.5 point underdogs. Total is 149.5 to 150.5 with Bowling Green. I set them as just a 1.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I really do like this coaching staff. Todd Simon, I think, is doing a tremendous job with this team, and he brings with him a few guys like Jason Spurgeon who are able to do a nice job of contributing right away. They already know the style with Spurgeon. He's a 7-footer that's able to pop some threes, was able to give Southern Utah about 6+ rebounds per game a season ago. And then for Bowling Green, they've been able to get good production in the backcourt out of Dejan Humphrey. He has been a well-traveled gentleman that began his career over at Holy Cross, and while he was over at Holy Cross was a little bit of an afterthought, and now has been able to become a primary scorer with about 11.5 points per contest. They have played him a little bit more off the ball, as they've been able to find good production out of the junior college transfer in Marcus Hill, who's been able to log 3 assists per game. It's not necessarily the offense that Todd Simon is looking for quite yet, but it's the workings of it. His team has been shooting just 27.5% from three-point range. They go up against Western Kentucky team that's also in quite a bit of flux. Steve Lutz, he comes over from Texas A&M Corpus Christi and did not get all of his players out there on the floor to begin the season because of the fact that these 2-time transfer waivers, they were not getting approved. But now he's got Jalen Jackson, who was able to give Texas A&M Corpus Christi while he was over there a season ago, right around 3 assists per game. That should be able to elevate this offense just a little bit, but you have to be wondering what you're going to be able to get out of Deontay Allen moving forward, as he was tremendous in the back half of the season last year. Final 10 games was logging north of 12 points per contest, was shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. Just feels like his growth has been a little bit stunted. Right now he's averaging about 8.5 points per game, has been dealing with injury over the last week or so we're not sure if he's actually going to be able to give you too much of an effort as well. And then on the more scoring side of things, Brandon Newman, 12 points, 6.5 boards, mid-30s point shooter that comes over from Purdue, has been able to do a solid job. But with this Western Kentucky team, they're going to need to rebound by committee, because right now Newman is leading the way with regards to rebounds. Bowling Green, they've got more size, and I do think that that's going to take it out of Western Kentucky. I do think that Western Kentucky, with their overall depth and their guard play, they're going to be able to get it done. But I do think that this is going to be an up-tempo game We have always seen Steve Lutz's teams be able to shoot the three well and always be able to play a little bit more up-tempo, and certainly with Todd Simon, he likes to play fast as well. So semi-total 151.5, taking a look at the over with Western Kentucky. Made them 1.5 point favorites, so taking the points with Bowling Green. 823, 824 on the betting board. Illinois plays those to Western Illinois. Western Illinois is an underdog between 25 and 26 points with your total between 140 and 141.5. Set my line at 28. I'm going to be willing to lay the number now. Last time we saw Western Illinois, they were actually in a pretty big dogfight against Southern, but we saw that same Southern team get absolutely dump trucked by Illinois as well. So it is a Western Illinois team that's in quite a bit of transition. They lost their coach in Rob Jeter during the offseason as he decided that he was going to be moving on to Southern Utah. And for this Illinois bunch, they're playing much better defense than they have in the past. And what I love about what Brad Underwood does is that he doesn't necessarily have one set system. It's all based on the actual players that he has on the roster. He curtails his style around them, and this season it's been a little bit more defense oriented, and it's just been a lot of versatility. Right now you've got each out of your top 6 scorers giving you at least 3.8 rebounds per game, just a by-committee approach. The team's not really shooting it well from 3. If I had Luke Good, he'd be able to shoot about 46.5% from 3, but oh no, they're shooting in the neighborhood about 30% from 3, but Dane Danger, he's been able to give you like 9 points, 5 boards, and that's the interesting thing. TJ Shannon has been the main scorer with about 19.5 points per game, despite the fact that they have played some overmatched competition. They don't have a single other guy that has been able to give you north of 9.5 points per game. I do think that they could use a little bit more out of Coleman Hawkins. Last year he was logging more like 10 points per contest. Thus far this year, down to about 4.7 points per game, but at 6'10", he really does stuff the stat sheet. 6 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.3 blocks per contest. He's able to do a lot for the team going up against a Western Illinois team in which they bring back Josiah West from a season ago. He's been able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game. Drew Cisse, he comes in from the non-Division I ranks, and he's been able to log about 10 boards per contest as well. Western Illinois, I remember last season, they were built a little bit more around their backcourt, but really other than Quinlan Bennett, you don't have a lot in the backcourt. This is very much a team looking at size, and it's caused them to be all out of sorts and taking care of the ball. 17 turnovers per game. They're only shooting about 29% from three-point range. Gotten some good production out of James Dent, another one of those non-Division I transfers who's been able to come in, give the team 17 points per game, but not a lot of depth with this team, not a lot in the backcourt. Illinois should be able to take full advantage in this Illinois team that has been just as stout as a rock. They have given up 64 points or fewer in all but one of their games this far this season. I do think that they're going to be able to hold up at the point of attack. I did set my total at 144, a big reason why Western Illinois, typically very much an up-tempo team, and they're certainly a team as giving up points upon points against Division I opponents. They have allowed at least 78 to all but one of them, and the lone exception is a very bad Valparaiso team. So going to be taking a look at the over with Illinois. Going to be willing to lay up to 27.5 with them. Now we've got games that have no numbers. 825, 826 on the board. It is from Old Kissimmee, Florida. It is the ESPN Events Invitational. Leading things off are the losers from yesterday in Butler versus Penn State. 825, 826 on the board for that one. And with this handicap, I did set Butler as a 1.5 point favorite, and I made my total of 145.5. 145 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over 146 or higher. I am going to be taking a look at the total under with regards to this Penn State bunch. They're a little bit of a work in progress, and I do like a lot of the pieces, and I certainly do think that Kudaswab is going to have a nice day down low. Kudaswab is right now logging north of 10 boards per contest, a block and a half per game. He's coming from Georgetown, and he's been rock solid, but you can tell that this Penn State team, which is pretty much like half of the VC roster from a season ago and the other half just being straight transfers, they're trying to get down this Mike Rhodes style in which they're looking to generate a bunch of turnovers. Going into this tournament, they were averaging about 11 steals per game, and I would like to see a little bit more Leo Boyle. He comes in from the Patriot League last season. He was a really good do-it-all player over at Lafayette, where he was able to pop threes at a 40% clip, 11.5 points, right around 2 assists per contest. He has not been able to give the team anything whatsoever. It's been touch and go with the backcourt, as Jameel Brown has been one of your key guys after he was a total afterthought a season ago. And for Butler, we saw them play a very harebrained game against Florida Atlantic, in which both teams got past 85 points. Can't say that I saw that coming, but I do think that despite the fact that they don't have a true rebounder like Kudaswab, they're going to be able to do a solid job down low. Andre 3000 Screen has been able to give you about 5 boards per contest coming in from Bucknell. You've had Pierre Brooks really take strides forward after he was a former top 150 recruit of Michigan State. He's not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but it's a guy that's able to give you 12 to 13 points per game at 6'6", has has good versatility, and Pasha Alexander is a really nice floor general as well. Just getting him away from Andre Cabello, I thought was key, because Andre Cabello, I thought, was just really dragging this guy down. He's back to getting north of 2 steals per contest, so I do think that it is going to be very much an up and down game. With bringing in Pasha Alexander, Butler has been able to crank up their tempo, and prior to yesterday, they were doing a pretty solid job on defense. Penn State, meanwhile, they have been able to do a nice job of being able to play a rocket ship style offense, and I am noticing that at the ESPN Event Center, the ball is going through the basket quite a bit. The shooter's eye appears to be very, very good, because we have been getting some harebrained and some very high-scoring games. So this is a circumstance where I did set Butler as a 1.5 point favorite, and with regards to this total, 145 or less, going to be taking a look at the over, 146 or higher to the under, and if I'm getting 2 or more with Penn State, going to be able to take the points as I set Butler a 1.5 point favorite. 827, 828 on the betting board. This is going to be Florida Atlantic going up against Texas A&M. No numbers currently up on this game, but with Texas A&M, I set them as a 2.5 point favorite, and I made my total to where a 138 or less, I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and a 139 or higher, I'm going to be diving in on the under. You've got a Texas A&M squad that just has so much depth and so many pieces that help out Wade Taylor IV. Wade Taylor IV has been able to do a superb job of being the main scorer for the team last year, was able to log 14 plus points per contest. He is going to be a very hard guard for the Florida Atlantic bunch that has just great depth of their own. Florida Atlantic, they bring back darn near everyone from a season ago, and it was a rough loss that they took against Bryant, but they were able to rebound with 91 points yesterday for Florida Atlantic. You still have all those guys in the backcourt that were able to be so efficient a season ago, and I think that Vladislav Golden is really going to be able to give Texas A&M some fits as well. True 7-footer that's able to give you 15 points, 6 boards, multiple blocks per contest. He's a good anchor down low for a team that does a really good job of, by committee, being able to rebound. And all of their top 4 scorers from a season ago are back, and all those guys, they were all able to give you at least 4.3 rebounds per game, with John L. Davis being the main guy. But on any given night, it could be John L. Davis, it could be Elijah Martin, it could be Nicholas Boyd. You could even have one night Brian Greenlee be your top scorer. You've got so many weapons there. But for Texas A&M, we have seen Henry Coleman come into his own as well. I think that he might be a little bit of an elixir to what Vladislav Golden is able to do down low. He's been able to give the team 10 plus rebounds per game. You've got Tyrese Radford, who doesn't necessarily shoot the 3 well at the guard spot, but he does a nice job being able to go down low for some rebounds. He's able to give you multiple assists per game as well. And I do like the pickup of Jace Carter as well as a double-figure scorer over at UIC. You got a Texas A&M team that's one of the few teams in the country that's able to match up with the overall depth of Florida Atlantic. And I do think that the overall athleticism of A&M wins out, despite the fact that this is going to be played out there in the great state of Florida. So a circumstance where I did set Texas A&M as a 2.5 point favorite, willing to lay up to 2 with them. 3 or more, going to be taking a look at the points with Florida Atlantic, and then 138 or less, I'm going to be taking a look at the over, 139 or higher to the under. Now this is one where I do need to simulate forward a little bit, so we've got something that is just completely off the board, but 829, 830, and 831, 832 are going to be the winners and the losers of what we saw from the ESPN Invitational event yesterday. The way I was simulating this out personally, I was thinking that you might get Boise State versus Iowa State in that first matchup, and then VCU versus Virginia Tech in the second matchup. And if you would get these two matchups with regards to Iowa State versus Boise State, I've set Iowa State as a 9-point favorite with a total of 131, and then for Virginia Tech versus VCU, I set Virginia Tech as a 6-point favorite with a total of 142, but obviously subject to a lot of change there. I do feel like we're going to be getting Iowa State in the first matchup, and with Iowa State, I do think that this bunch is still going to be able to do a rock-solid job on defense. They did get perhaps exposed a little bit in terms of their offense early on in that game against VCU, because let's call it what it is. Iowa State, while they entered into this tournament 4-0 and they had won every single game by 30-plus points, it was against Grambling, Idaho State, Lindenwood, and UW Green Bay. Let's call it what it is, not necessarily monsters of the Midway, but I do like what you've been able to get out of Milan Monsilovic. He's been able to come in from Pewaukee, Wisconsin, double-figure scorer, guy with size that's able to pop some threes, and I was feeling like Iowa State was not going to shoot 39.5% from three-point range for forever. This is not a team that typically is built around that. TJ Otzelberger's teams typically leave a little bit of something to be desired from three-point range, but they play good, tough, tenacious defense, and they were able to do a solid job against VCU yesterday, but VCU was just scanning all the shots that that they were taking. And if you do get something like a VCU versus Boise State matchup instead, I would be setting VCU to where I'd probably be setting them as more like a 1, maybe a 2-point underdog in that sort of spot. With this Boise State team, I'm starting to be out on them just a little bit more. I do like what Tyson Dagenhart is able to bring to the table. He at right around 6'8", 6'9", is able to bury some threes, but you can tell that the team is badly missing Marcus Shaver, who was Mr. Do It All, able to give the team like 4.5 assists, double-figure amount of points, was a great three-point shooter. That's why you looked at Chibuzo Agbo, who was back from a season ago, and he entered into yesterday shooting 45.5% from three with 17 points per contest. But with Boise State, much like it was an issue last season, depth has been an issue this year. They have been giving a lot of minutes to Roddy Anderson III, who comes in from UC San Diego, but for Anderson, entered into yesterday logging 25 minutes per game with 2.7 points per contest. They just need a little bit more on that front, and if you do get something like a VCU versus a Boise State matchup, I do think that with Boise State, they would be a very slight favorite just because VCU, even though they had a good showing yesterday against Iowa State, this is still a team I think is a little bit of a work in progress. They have been dealing with the injury to Sean Bairstow. That has really been hurting them, though. Zeb Jackson, along with Max Shoga, have been your top scorers out there in the backcourt. A pair of guys, they're able to give you 14-plus points per contest, but you can tell that they don't have a ton of depth, especially down low. Kune has been able to do a pretty solid job of being able to register some rebounds coming in from Cal, but I'm sort of out on VCU until they are able to get Sean Bairstow back in the fold, as Ryan Odom was very much relying upon him coming into the season. And if you do, for some reason, get a matchup of Virginia Tech versus Iowa State, that would be a spot where I would be setting Iowa State more around about a 5, maybe even a 4.5 / a 5.5 point favorite. Depends upon how Virginia Tech looks against Boise State. I have to do this podcast before I've actually seen that game, so that one is going to be subject to a little bit more change if we do get that matchup. But for Virginia Tech, I've been very impressed by what you've been able to get down low out of Mr. Lynn Kidd. 17.5 points, 9.8 rebounds. He should be changing his name to Lynn Man because he has been a man. You've got Sean Padula, who's been incredibly efficient. Last year, gave the team 15 points per contest. Was able to do all 4 assists without turning it over a lot. Was able to shoot it really well from three-point range. The one question that you always have with this Virginia Tech team is defense, because Virginia Tech, traditionally, they play relatively low and slow. They have a lot of good shooters, like Hunter Couture is back to being able to register double figures. I absolutely love what he's bringing to the table. And Virginia Tech, much like last season, they are not getting out of sorts, right around 280th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. So it would be interesting if we do get Iowa State versus Virginia Tech in terms of total. I'd be setting mine probably more in that neighborhood, about a 134, maybe a 133, depending upon what we do see on Thursday. So it is a spot where if you get Boise State versus Iowa State laying 9, total of 131, and Virginia Tech versus VCU, Virginia Tech laying 6 and a total of 142, and then more of a Iowa State versus Virginia Tech matchup. I'd be setting Iowa State in that neighborhood about 4.5 or so, with more of a 134.5-ish total. And then for VCU versus Boise State laying a deuce, total in that game more in that neighborhood about a 138, maybe a 137, depending upon what we do see on Thursday. I apologize, it's a little bit wishy-washy, trying to project forward a little bit on that one. 8:33, 8:34 on the betting board. UNC Greensboro is going to be playing against UMKC. This is out there in the Bahamas, and UMKC is between a 10.5 to a 12-point underdog, with your total between 135.5 and 136.5. For UMKC, I did set them as underdogs of 9 points. I am going to be willing to take those points with UNC Greensboro. Certainly has been a team that has been able to rise up this far this season, as they had that big win against Arkansas. And I really do like the Langley brothers. You've got Keyshawn and Kobe Langley that have been able to do a good job playing in tandem with one another. The question mark that you had coming into the season with this team was what you were going to be able to get down low, because Abdul Mohamed Salah is out of the fold, but you've had Michael Brown Jones be that do-it-all sort of player for this team. Contributing 18 points, 6 boards. He's currently shooting 60% from 3. I don't think that that's going to be withstanding, but he's been able to help out the Langleys, as Keyshawn Langley is more of your scorer. Last season shot 42% from 3, 14.5 points, right around 2.5 assists per contest, and Kobe does just the little things for the team. Currently has as many points as assists with 6.7. Last year, he was able to chip in their 2 steals per contest this year, more like 1.3 steals per game, but both of these guys do a nice job of being able to fill their role with the team. You've got a Greensboro team that is able to go right around about 7 to 8 deep. You're going to have some guys that they don't necessarily give you a ton of scoring, and I do think that perhaps Miles Jones moving forward, the transfer from Radford, and I believe that is the son of Mike Jones. You might be asking who, and I do say Mike Jones, might be able to give you a little bit of something as well, but I like what Donovan Atwell has been able to bring to the table as well. Someone that thus far this season is logging about 7.5 points per contest after he was coming off the bench for the team a season ago. But for UMKC, I think that they hold snug because they've got Cooper Kopp back in the fold, who was limited due to injury a season ago. 2 years ago, shot over 40% from 3 and has become the team's primary scorer. 14 points, 5 boards, shooting about 37.5% from 3. UMKC typically is relatively inefficient under Marvin Menzies, and their whole MO is make the game very sloppy, make the game just an eyesore in general. But what has really stood out to me is that I think that you're going to be able to get a little bit more out of Ellen David and Becca Jr. He last season was able to log 7.5 rebounds, 9.5 points per game, just 3.3 rebounds per game here in the early going, logging sub 15 minutes per game. That's been a little bit interesting. I don't know if he's dealing with an injury or what, but that doesn't seem like good old UMKC basketball like we all know and love. You've had Promise C. Idiaro be able to get a few minutes down low as well. Someone with some relatively solid size that was a part-time starter for the team a season ago as well. So UMKC has clearly been experimenting a little bit. Hopefully those experiments have resulted in them being able to get some better results, because I do think that as long as they feature a little bit more of David and Becca Jr., and you're able to get more out of the backcourt duo of Christian Coruscant along with R.T. Stapleton, who began his career over at Radford, went down to the non-D1 level and has resurfaced. The UMKC going to be able to hold in this game against a Greensboro team that they themselves do a tremendous job with their defense. I set my line at 9, so I'm going to be willing to take double figures with UMKC, and did set my total out at 135. Here at a 135.5, it is my buy point on the under. Both of these teams relatively slow in terms of their tempo, so going to be going under. And with UMKC getting double figures, going to be taking a look at those points. 835, 836 on the betting board. Brown. What can Brown do for you? Well, if the Bears are able to lose this game by less than 3, they'll make you money, as they're playing against Delaware out there in the Bahamas. Delaware's a 3-point favorite, total setting between 140 and 141.5. And I set Brown as a favorite in this spot. I'm going to be taking a look at them outright on the money line. You take a look at Brown in terms of their shot quality numbers, and I know that our good friend Justn Perri mentioned it. They've been one of the most unlucky teams in all of college basketball, and just watching this team, they're much better than what they've shown through thus far. They've been able to do a solid job down low, with Nana Owusu Anane being able to give you right around 9 boards per contest, and then you've got back the fold after he was injured for the back half of last season, Kulu Aina, who's been able to give you about 11 points, 6 rebounds per contest. Keno Lilly Jr. is a go-to scorer that's been able to log about 18 points per contest thus far this season. I will say he's missed a game or two thus far this season. Should be good to go in this one, though, as he was able to have a nice performance against USC a few days ago. Meanwhile, for Delaware, they've been able to get the job done in each of their last 4 games, but not necessarily playing against the world's greatest competition in a lot of those contests, and they're trying to turn the page after last season. It was all about what you were able to get out of Jameer Nelson Jr. This year, Jair Davis has stepped up with 20.5 points, 7.5 boards, and Christian Ray has been able to do a nice job down low with about 9.5 rebounds per game as well. But you're going to need to get a little bit more just consistency out of Jalon Trent. He comes in from North Dakota, 8 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, right around 2 steals, 1.8 blocks per contest. He's a nice stat sheet stuffer, but he really doesn't give this team too much of an element from the outside. And for Delaware, they're currently shooting 45% from 3-point range, and Joe Drumgoole is a good 3-point shooter. He's not quite a 44.5% 3-point shooter. Tyler Hauser, who comes in from VMI, solid 3-point shooter. He's right now shooting 66% from 3 as a 6'9" combo player. We should see that go downward. Brown, one of the better mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. I do think that they do a good job of limiting this Delaware team a little bit. Delaware, a little bit more of a slow and controlled team. Meanwhile, Brown, they're actually playing at about a top 75 pace in terms of total possessions per game. They've really cranked things up, and I do think that Brown is going to be able to crank things up to be able to get an over. I set my total at 142. Think that this is going to be a little bit of a nip and tuck game that Brown is going to be able to pull out with their strength down low. So I did set Brown as a 2-point favorite. Taking a look at them outright on the money line. Set my total at 142, so I'm also going to be taking a look at this total over 837, 838 on the betting board. UIC, Illinois, Chicago, they are going to be playing against Middle Tennessee. This is from the Bahamas, and With UIC, they are between a 2.5 to a 3-point underdog. In your total between 129.5 and 130.5. With UIC, I set them as a 1.5 point favorite. We're just taking a look at a lot of underdogs outright on the money line, I guess, in this tournament. I'm going to be taking a look at UIC. With Middle Tennessee, they did lose a lot of heart and soul pieces from a season ago. It's still a solid defense, but team that really, other than Elias King, is not getting a ton on the offensive side of things. Elias King has been able to do a nice job, being able to log 14 points per contest. Last season, shot about 40% from 3-point range. You've got Jared Coleman-Jones, who's 6'10". He's been able to take some strides forward down low for this team as well. But for UIC, you've got Toby Okani, who is just a very versatile piece at 6'8". Comes in from Duquesne, and last season tipped in there about 11 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists. He does a good job of being able to check all the boxes for UIC. A UIC team that has also been able to get a ton out of Isaiah Rivera, who came over from Colorado State, has been able to log 17 points per game. And for UIC, we should see some regression from the fact that they are currently shooting 39% from 3-point range. But for UIC, I do think that they'll dial back the 14 turnovers per game, as well. Okani has been turning the ball over a little bit too much. I think that they're going to be looking a little bit more to CJ Jones to be able to bring up the ball for the team as well. CJ Jones a season ago, about 2 assists per contest, was a starter that played a little bit more off the ball at 6'5", but they've been trusting him with the ball a little bit more recently. It's been going well for them. You've got Marquise Kennedy, who comes in from Loyola Chicago, has been a bit banged up here in the beginning part of the season, but has been able to return in the last 2 contests. He's someone that should be able to take the load off a little bit as well. And I do think that the reintegration of Kennedy into the offense going to be able to help out a UIC team that has quite a bit of depth against a Middle Tennessee team that last year they certainly had that. They don't have as much of it this season, and it is a Middle Tennessee team that, while they do a solid job of being able to generate turnovers, losing a lot of those key defensive pieces like Tafile Leonard and company, I think is going to be hurting them. So, going to be taking a look at UIC right on the money line. I do think that this total is too low. I set my total 137.5. I recognize that Luke Yakovlevich over at UIC is a little bit more of a defensive mastermind, but he's got an offense that is humming along pretty solidly, and his team has been playing quite a bit more up-tempo this season. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over and UIC outright on the money line. 839, 840 on the betting board. Ohio is going to be playing against George Washington. Also from the Bahamas, George Washington finds themselves as a underdog of between 2 and 3.5 points, and your totals between 152.5 and 153.5. We're not going to be able to go outright on the money line, but we're looking at the underdog once again. I said Ohio as a 1.5 point favorite. I feel like this game is very much a little bit of a toss-up, and being able to get multiple points with George Washington is something that appeals to me. George Washington still not an amazing defense, but they're playing much better defense than they did a season ago. You've been able to have Garrett Johnson be able to really help out the team after last year. It was just all about James Bishop. He had to average north of 20 points per contest. He was doing out 5+ assists per contest, and he's still doing so, and does need to cut down on the 4.8 turnovers per game. That's a top 5 mark in all of college basketball, and not in a good way, but you've been able to get a lot more down low as well out of Babatunde Akingbola. Hopefully I said that correctly. Gentleman who comes in from Auburn, was very much an afterthought there. He has been able to give the team 3.5 blocks per contest. George Washington last year was a bottom 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's been able to help them out quite a bit. You've also had Maximus Edwards be able to be cranked up to the Maximus. 15 points, 7.5 boards, shooting north of 50% from 3-point range as well. And then been able to get about 17 points per contest out of Garrett Johnson as well. So he has been relatively impressive. Meanwhile, you've got an Ohio bunch that they've been looking at the Browns, actually the AJs, as you've got AJ Brown, who's been able to do a solid job with 13 points, 5 boards, as right now Miles Brown, who was expected to be big coming into the season, he's played just 1 game, so that's why you're not relying upon both Browns, but AJ Clayton, how about what he's been able to do with 13 points per contest, currently shooting 60% from 3-point range. We should be seeing quite a bit of fall off there, but Ohio last season was a good 3-point shooting team in their own right, and they've got Jalen Hunter, very underrated point guard that a season ago doled out 4 assists, 13 points per contest. He's picking up right where he left off a season ago with 5.7 assists, 1.3 turnovers per contest. It is a Ohio team that has been able to do a good job taking care of the ball. They've gotten a little bit more down low out of Gabe Witznitzer. He's not necessarily played a ton of minutes, but right around 4.7 rebounds every 15.5 minutes per contest. Pairing that up with Elmore James being a top scorer, I do think makes this Ohio team lethal. And for Ohio, they're playing a bit better on the defensive side of things. than they did a season ago as well. George Washington has been able to ratchet it up as well. So I did set my total 149.5. Going to be going in on the under. Now, George Washington being able to get multiple points with them, revamping things down low, I'm going to be willing to take those points to go along with the under. 841, 842 on the betting board. We go to the Emerald Coast Classic out there in Florida. Mercer and Tennessee State do battle. Tennessee State is a favorite of between 1 and 1.5 points. Totals between 142.5 and 143. And with Tennessee State, I also did set them as a favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this very small number. I set Tennessee State as a 3-point favorite. Mercer lost that game to Clark Atlanta. Shout out the alma mater of Bomani Jones for them being able to get that win, but for Mercer, even though they played a little bit better ever since then, just been very off-putting what we've seen. And you do have to have a feeling that perhaps the coaching staff in general is going to be on a little bit of a hot seat, as they just have not delivered at Mercer, to say the least. You do have Jalen McCreary, who's able to give you about 14.5.6 boards per contest, but I think that DJ Bellinger matches up very well with him. Bellinger comes over after he began his career over at Belmont. He's been able to do a nice job logging about 15 points, 5.5 boards. Currently shooting 50% from three-point range. Again, we should see a little bit of a drop-off. There it is early on in the season as Tennessee State as a whole. I do think that their 34.5% three-point shooting is actually a fairly representative number for them, but love what you've been able to get out of Keon Hodges. He comes over from Eastern Illinois, where he was their top scorer, and he's going to do it all player. 5.5 boards, 9 points, pair of assists. Love the way that he's able to stuff the stat sheet. And then Christian Brown, Marcus Fitzgerald Jr. They're both back from a season ago. Thus far, they've been able to log about 23 points per contest after a season ago. They were averaging more about 26 points per game. Tennessee State is a little bit rough down low, but I do think that you're going to be able to get more out of Jason Thibodeau moving forward. He comes over from Florida, 6'11" big man that has been able to give you thus far about 5 boards per contest and has become a good rim protector with 2.5 blocks per game. You really don't have as much of that with Mercer. They lost David Craig in the offseason via the transfer portal, so their size is lacking. They don't have a lot of great three-point shooting about 27.5% from three-point range. The Notre Dame transfer, Robbie Carmody, has been able to chip in there 11 points per game, but they have yet to really find that true rhythm in the backcourt. Anthony Bernard has had to step up as the point guard as a true freshman, and that's led to this team just being all over the place with regards to their offense, and I do think that Tennessee State is going to be able to take advantage of that. Tennessee State, very much an up-tempo team. Mercer is looking to dial it back a little bit more, but I do think that Tennessee State can have their way a little bit more in terms of the tempo war, and I do think that Tennessee State going to be able to get the job done in the backcourt. I did set Tennessee State as a 3-point favorite, willing to lay the number, and my total 145, so also looked at the over, 843, 844 on the betting board. It is Western Michigan, and they're going to be playing against Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana finds themselves as between 2 and 3-point favorites, and your total on this game is anywhere between 142.5 and also seeing a 142 out there as well. So my total 140.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under with Southeast Louisiana. I do feel like they should be the favorite, and I set them at a 2.5. We're seeing between 2 and 3, and personally, I would rather lay 2 rather than take 3. Western Michigan held in there in a game against Northwestern a few weeks ago, but with this Western Michigan team, I think the big question mark is, what are you going to be able to get out of this backcourt? Because you do have Seth Hubbard, who's right now chipping in there 17 points per contest. It's a team that overall is shooting 34.5% from three-point range. I want to see a little bit more before I'm willing to buy in. And B. Artis White, who has dealt with injuries the last few seasons, he has been in and out of the fold as well. He had a very nice 41-minute performance against North Dakota State to begin the season, returned for 10 minutes in the team's most recent game against Ohio State. You got to be wondering what you're going to be able to get out of him moving forward, because I think he plays but is once again limited. Javon Hanna, he's been able to chip in there about 6.5 points per contest, as well as a little bit of a 6'4" wing, but for Southeast Louisiana, I do think that Mr. Do-It-All, Roger McFarland, is going to be able to take hold in this game. 16 points, 6.5 boards, shooting 47% from three-point range, should drop off a little bit there, but you've also got a nice combo player in 6'7", Nick Caldwell, who he a season ago shot 37.5% from 3 with 11 points, 5.5 boards. There's just so many versatile pieces, and even though you've got someone like Titus Wright on the flip side for Western Michigan that's able to give you right around 6 rebounds per game and perhaps a little bit more overall size, I do think that Brody Woodbury, who's 6'11", he's going to be able to match up quite well for Southeast Louisiana. I do think that Southeast Louisiana, having more proven backcourt pieces and the injury to B. Artis White, that allows them to be able to get it done in this circumstance. So I did set my line at 2.5. I am going to be willing to lay 2 with Southeast Louisiana. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game. Southeast Louisiana certainly struggling with their offense, and got a Western Michigan team that scored 70 points or fewer in regulation in every one of their games as far as the season. As the reason why they broke the 71-point plateau against North Dakota State was due to overtime. So looking at the under and looking at Southeast Louisiana laying up to 2, 845, 846 on the betting board. The Ohio State University takes on Alabama from Florida. Alabama, a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite. Your total between 151 and 151.5. Said Alabama's a 6.5 point favorite, being able to get between 7.5 and 8. I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Ohio State. I think that this Ohio State team is better than what they've shown thus far this season. As for Ohio State, you've got a lot of good forwards on this bunch. You've got Zed Key, who's been able to do a nice job hauling their 7.5 rebounds per game. Felix Opara has not necessarily been the dominator we were hoping he would be with regards to like rebounds and points, but 2.5 blocks per game. He does a sturdy job there. And then you've got a pair of guys in Bruce Thornton along with Roddy Gale Jr. combining for about 8.5 assists per game, a combined about 30 points per contest. Thornton shooting 38% from 3-point range. Jameson Battle has come in from Minnesota, and he's well battled. He's been able to shoot about 39% from 3-point range. Absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table. And then we have an Alabama unit that has had Mark Sears really do a nice job in the backcourt. 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists. It's an Alabama team that's currently in the top 15 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, averaging north of 100 points per game. Alabama really just hasn't been tested yet. Mercer, South Alabama, Indiana State, and Morehead State is who they started out with this season. Meanwhile, for Ohio State, they had to play at home against Texas A&M a little bit earlier on. Oakland has proven to be a relatively solid foe as well. And for this Alabama team, certainly Grant Nelson and his versatility is going to be a hard guard for Ohio State. 14 points, 7 boards at like 6'11". He's able to pop threes. He's able to handle the ball. That's just rough in general. And Aaron Action Estrada, it's been a nice stat sheet suffer as a very versatile guard as well. But I think that this Ohio State team is going to be able to match up. Ohio State appears to be much improved on defense from what they were a season ago. And I do think that with Alabama and their very, very hot shooting, they're going to see this die down a little bit. They're shooting 49% from 3 on volume. I mean, they have taken 88 threes and they have made 43 of them thus far in 4 games. We should see this dial back a little bit more, but even with that, I do think that Alabama gets their pace in this game. I set my total at 154.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over, but I do think that those mysteries allow Ohio State to be able to hang in the game. I'm going to be willing to take 7 or more with the Ohio State University, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total over 847, 848 on the betting board. Also from Florida, it's Oregon and Santa Clara. Santa Clara, an underdog of 6 points, settles between 144.5 and 145.5. I set Oregon as a favorite of 4 points. Here at the 6, I am going to be willing to take the points with Santa Clara. This Broncos bunch has been able to do a very good job down low, as you've got Christoph Tilley, a true 7-footer that's able to man things down low. You've got Johnny O'Neal, who stands right around 6'10". He's able to pop some threes, and he's going to match up quite well, in my opinion, with Nate Biddle, who's been able to give you 13 points, 6 boards. Now, I'm sort of expecting N'Faly Dante to be able to go in this game, as he's been missing the last few games for Oregon. Didn't sound like it was a super major injury, but it was something to be taking note of, and I believe that Biddle was out of the fold in that game against Florida A&M as well, which is why it was a little bit closer than a lot of people thought. Oregon has been dealing with a bunch of injuries, and with N'Faly Dante, this guy, you need to wrap up in bubble wrap because he has been getting injured a whole heck of a lot. But I do think that you're going to have your main big men out there on the floor for Oregon, a team that has been able to shoot about 38% from 3, but also 58.5% at the free throw line. It has been a very winding road for the team, to say the least. Jesse Zarzula, who comes in from Central Michigan, has been able to give you about 10 points per contest, but with the Santa Clara team, I think that they're going to be able to hold in there because they themselves, as Carlos Marshall, who's been able to do a solid job logging about 17.5 points, steal per game, shooting 48% from 3-point range. Adama Ball, who was over at Arizona, one of the top international prospects from a season ago, has been able to shoot it well from 3, and just all the size. Francisco Cafaro, he's 7 feet tall. You've also been able to get a little bit of production as well in regards to a backcourt piece with 8 points per game from Tyree Bryan. He's right around 6'5". He's the guy that's able to light it up from 3-point range. So I do think that the overall size of Santa Clara going to be able to hold in there against an Oregon team that they've just been banged up in general and a little bit out of sorts. So I did set my total at 144. I think that Santa Clara going to be playing a little bit more defense oriented this season. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the 6 with Santa Clara, set my line at 4. All right, for the battle for Atlantis, we have no clear real matchups right now, so I'm going to do my best with this. We should probably be getting, with regards to the championship matchup, Villanova versus Memphis, but we are going to spitball this one right here, as we know that Northern Iowa is going to be playing in that leadoff game against either Stanford or Michigan. And if Northern Iowa does face off against Stanford, I'd be setting Stanford as a 6.5 point favorite. So we'd be willing to lay up to 6 with Stanford, 7 or more. Going to be willing to take the points with Northern Iowa, and then a 146 or less, looking at the over 147 or higher to the under with Northern Iowa. Whether they're playing against Michigan or Stanford, they're going to be a little bit outgunned with regards to their size. As for Northern Iowa, they do have quite a few versatile pieces. Bourne is someone that I like for this bunch. He's been able to be a 15-plus point per game scorer each of the last few seasons. Michael Duex is able to give you a little bit of versatility as well, but I do think that they are going to be very much against either Stanford or Michigan, with Michigan having all those guys like Terrence Williams, who's able to pop it from three-point range. Will Cheddar has been able to shoot north of 50% from three. I certainly do think that you're going to be seeing a little bit of a fall-off on that front, but all in all, I do take a look at this Northern Iowa bunch. I do think that they're going to be outgunned, and if they do go up against Michigan, I think that this could be a line that could be reaching more like 9, maybe even 10, because I like what Doug McDaniel has been able to do in the backcourt for this Michigan team. It is a Michigan team that we did see against Memphis a few days ago have their turnover woes, but we also saw them completely handle St. John's. There have been times where they have been incredibly impressive thus far this season, so it is going to be very interesting to see what we get on that front, but I would be setting Northern Iowa regardless as an underdog. And if you do get Northern Iowa versus Michigan, instead of a 146.5 total in terms of them against Stanford, I'd probably be raising it up to 148.5, and then I'm thinking we get Michigan versus Texas Tech, which in that spot I'd be setting Michigan as more of a 1.5 point favorite with a total of 143.5. We have seen Michigan get a little bit more slow down here in this event, but I do think that for this Michigan bunch, they would be able to match up fairly well against a Texas Tech team that they do have a 7-footer in Warren Washington. They've got also someone in Darion Williams who comes over from Nevada. He's been a nice do-it-all sort of player, but I do have a few question marks on the front of this team as well, because I do think that with Texas Tech, they are speeding it up a little bit more than what Graham McCaslin would like to when he was over at North Texas. I do think that for this Texas Tech team, having Joe Toussaint be able to go off the ball, that's been rock solid for them. And if Texas Tech does somehow get Stanford, I'd probably be setting Texas Tech as at least about a 4.5 to a 5 point favorite in that one. I just do not trust in the Stanford team, even though you have Andrei Stojakovic being able to do a solid job of being able to pop some threes. I do think that Stanford would be a little bit outgunned there. And then we do know that in the final two games, because I had to really speculate on that one, we're going to get North Carolina versus Arkansas and Villanova versus Memphis. We've got no numbers on these games, but 853, 854 should be North Carolina, Arkansas. And I said North Carolina is a 2 point favorite. I made this total 150 with Arkansas. It is still a little bit of a work in progress team. You just get that year in and year out with Eric Musselman, but I do think that they're going to be able to match up quite well in the backcourt against a North Carolina team that it does still feel like they're trying to sort out some things with regards to their guard play. They were able to get that game to overtime against Villanova somehow, some way, but unable to pull it out in the end. Armando Bacot obviously has been tremendous on the glass for the team. He's currently averaging north of 13 rebounds per game, so you know exactly what you're going to be getting there. And for Arkansas, that's going to be a tough guard, but you've also got Bacot and company having to go up against Trevon Brazil. It's just an absolutely tremendous athlete for this Arkansas team. He's someone that stands right around 6'10". He's able to let it fly from three-point range at north of 40% clip, but we have been seeing quite a bit of regression with this Arkansas three-point shooting. They entered in the tournament shooting north of 38% from three-point range, and we just haven't seen a lot out of Mekhi Mitchell as well. I thought that he'd be a little bit better down low, hasn't necessarily been able to deliver a lot. I like what I've seen out of Tremont Mark, who's been able to give you right around 15.5 points per contest, and then K-Leaf Battle, he's been able to do a nice job, entered into yesterday with 15 points per contest, shooting north of 40% from three, but I do think that, for lack of a better term, because you have so many options with Arkansas, it's hurting them because they don't necessarily know who to go to. Meanwhile, for North Carolina, RJ Davis has really been the main man in the backcourt. He's been able to help out Harrison Ingram, who's got a lot of versatility, and I feel like he's just scratching the surface on what he's able to do. And if you're able to get just a little bit more out of Cormac Ryan, who's shooting some 30% from three, that's going to be big for North Carolina. So going to be one to lay up to 1.5 with North Carolina, 2.5 for more, taking the points with Arkansas, and then 149.5 or less, looking at the over 150.5 or higher to the under, and then 855, 856 is Memphis versus Villanova. I said Villanova is 1.5 point favorite with a total of 145.5 with Memphis. They've looked pretty impressive here in the battle for Atlantis. I still have a few question marks with this team, though, because we do know that Penn Hardaway coach teams, they typically do have some tough times being able to hold on to the ball, and I do think that turnovers might be coming through just a little bit here, and you've got a Villanova team that, in general, they do a very solid job of being able to keep things very clean, very crisp. Sometimes they do have off shooting nights, but you've been able to have Tyler Burton along with Eric Dixon down low be able to combine for about 14.5 rebounds per game. Both of these guys shooting north of 40% from three, and Villanova the last 2 years have been number one in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage. So if this comes down to just doing the little things well, I trust in Villanova Villanova a little bit more against a Memphis team that they're shooting about 66% at the free throw line. It's a whole new look team with Memphis with a lot of great players. You bring in Caleb Mills, who is a rock-solid scorer over at Florida State. I remember he was the American Player of the Year in the preseason a few years ago while he was over at Houston. David Jones has a few triple-doubles to his credit in his career, currently shooting well north of 40% from three. That should be dying down a little bit. Even someone like Nick Jourdain is able to step up. Heck, we saw Ashton Hardaway in that game against Michigan be able to bury 5 threes. So, there's a big-time just glut of weapons for Memphis, but the defense for Villanova has gotten so much better ever since Justin Moore came back. It was brutal last season until he came back. Now with him back in the fold, I do think that it is quite a bit better. So it is a spot where against Memphis with Villanova would be one to lay up to one with them. Two or more would be taking a look at the points with Memphis, and 145 or less, looking at the over 146 or higher to the under. 57, 858 on the betting board. It is Oregon State and Pittsburgh doing battle from Barclays Center. With Pittsburgh, they are 9.5 to 10-point favorites, and your total on this game is 144.5. And with this Pittsburgh bunch, I did set them as favorites of 11.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Pittsburgh. I've been a little bit off put by the fact that they played some very easy competition to begin the season, but they dominated that easy competition, and it's called what it is. You're now playing an Oregon State team that is less than stellar. I like what you've been able to get out of Jordan Pope, who's been able to log 19 points per contest, but past that, it's an Oregon State backcourt that it's far from great, to say the least. Meanwhile, Carlton Carrington, he began his college basketball career with a triple-double against North Carolina A&T. Has been a very versatile piece for Pittsburgh. He'll see his 47% three-point shooting drop a little bit, but 17 points, 5 boards, 6 assists. Love what he's able to bring to the table. You've got the Diaz-Graham brothers, who have some nice versatility. Overall, Pittsburgh is shooting about 36% from three. These two guys, they've been able to step up in quite a big way. With the front court, you've been able to have Blake Hinson as a 6'6", 6'7", a little bit of a combo player. Do a nice job in all fronts with 19.5 points, 5 boards, shooting 38% from three-point range, with Frederico being the main guy down low, giving you 2 blocks per game. And Oregon State just doesn't have any way of being able to match up with that. You've right now got pretty much 2 guys that have played in more than 2 games this far this season, with north of 4 rebounds per game. Been able to get about 7.8 boards out of Tyler Bladeau, so he's been able to do a little bit of something, but you're expecting a little bit more out of Christian Wright when he transferred over from Georgia. He's only been able to get the team right around 6 points. Hasn't been much of a facilitator for an Oregon State team currently playing at one of the slower paces in all of college basketball. Pittsburgh's been cranking things up a little bit, and Pittsburgh, their defensive numbers are warped a little bit from holding down the likes of Binghamton, North Carolina A&T, Jacksonville, what have you, but I do think that they hold down an Oregon State team that's just having a struggle putting the ball in the basket, with their numbers being propped up a little bit if you look at the raw numbers by the fact that they have played multiple overtime games. So going to be taking a look at Pittsburgh, willing to lay up to 11 with them, and set my total 141.5, so also diving in on the under. 859, 860 on the betting board. It is Florida and Baylor doing battle from Barclays Center, and Florida finds themselves as an underdog between 2.5 and 3.5 points. Your total on this game is between 157 and 157.5, and with Florida, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. So I'm going to be taking a look at Baylor, willing to lay the 3 that I'm seeing with Florida. I do like the fact that they've got a lot of nice versatile pieces on this team, and Walter Clayton certainly is a solid scorer for this team. He and Will Richard have both been able to give you double figures, and do have to like what you've been able to get out of Micah Handglatten, who he season ago over at Marshall, a little bit of a designated rebounder, able to do a good job of being able to block some shots, but them not having E.J. Jarvis this season, you can tell, has been hurting this team a little bit. I've liked what I've seen out of Thomas Haw as well. He's a 6'9" freshman that's been able to come in, pop a few threes. He's been able to give you about 5 boards per contest, but the overall athleticism of Baylor is some of the best in all of college basketball. Yves Missy being able to chip in there 6.5 boards, 2.5 blocks. He's really been able to give the team some rough and tumble down low, with Jonathan Chalma-Chachua still trying to work his way through injuries. Ray J. Dennis, Jacoby Walter in the backcourt have been a nice 1-2 punch. Dennis has been your main floor general. It's taken a little bit of a step back after he scored right around 19 points per contest at Toledo a season ago. Walter has really been that main guy putting the ball in the basket, 42% three-point shooting, 19 points per contest, but it's just a really well-rounded Baylor team that is shooting its collective 37% from three-point range. With Baylor, you've had a few question marks with regards to the defense, and certainly it's been a little bit hot and cold to begin the season, but this team has just been a rocket ship, 88-plus points in 4 out of their 5 games thus far this season. Meanwhile, for Florida, they put up some blistering numbers. They have been able to put up at least 85 on every team that they played, aside from Virginia. But I do think that the defenses are going to be able to take hold a little bit. I do think that you're going to see a little bit of regression with these offenses, and both of these teams, in their own right, do a relatively solid job down low, especially with Florida having Therese Samuel. But I do think that the backcourt advantage is going to be won by Baylor. That'll allow them to be able to win the game. I did set my total at 152 I'm going to be diving in on the under with Baylor blown to lay up to 3.5 with them. 861, 862 on the betting board. This is the Children's Invitational out there in San Diego. Seton Hall and Iowa are going to be doing battle, and there is no numbers currently up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I said Seton Hall is a 1.5 point favorite and a total of 151.5. So 151 or less, looking at the over, 152 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under. I do have to just adjust Iowa pretty big with regards to home and road splits, and we saw it on display on Thanksgiving. Iowa just 67 points against Oklahoma. I don't necessarily think that that's a product of the competition. I think that's a product of Iowa just doesn't shoot well away from Carver Hawkeye Arena. If you date it back to the beginning of the 2022-23 season, they're averaging right around 21 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home, and at home, they shoot north of 37% from three. On the road, they shoot sub 28% from three-point range. I don't think it's any sort of a coincidence. With Iowa, they are going to have Ben Krikke down low. He's been able to do a relatively solid job, chipping in there right around about 18 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but on the flip side, you've got a Seton Hall team that, even though they do lose a few pieces from a season ago, I still think that they're going to be able to do a pretty nice job down low. You've got Elijah Hutchins-Everett along Jada Bediako that at a little bit of a lower level of basketball a season ago, they were able to do a pretty solid job, being able to reel in some rebounds. The big thing for Seton Hall is being able to put it in there from three-point range, as you've got Elamir Dawes, who was about a 40% three-point shooter a season ago. He had a little bit of a rough day yesterday. It's really been Kadari Richmond who's been carrying the mail for this team. He's been able to do a nice job with the double-figure amount of points. He gives you 5 boards, 5 assists, multiple steals per contest. Just an absolute stat sheet suffer. And I think that Iowa going to have a tough time being able to match up with that. Patrick McCaffrey's able to give you a few rebounds per game. And Peyton Sanford, he's a good three-point shooter at home. On the road, not so much. You've got an Iowa team that in general, I feel like they're going to be a little bit out of sorts, having a tough time being able to guard the three-point arc. So I think that allows Seton Hall to be able to get the job done, and I do have to shade down my totals for Iowa just because, once again, they don't shoot the same on the road as they do at home. So 151 or less looking over, 152 or higher, taking a look at the under end. With Seton Hall, want to lay a point with them, / take them as a money line underdog. We need to be catching at least 2 to consider Iowa. 863, 864 on the betting board. Oklahoma and USC do battle from the state of California. No numbers up on this game, but I did set USC as a 3-point favorite, and I made my total 141. So we'll take 3.5 or more with Oklahoma, 2.5 or less laying it with USC, and then 140.5 or less looking at the over, 141.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under with Oklahoma. I looked at this roster coming into the season, and I didn't necessarily see a world's greatest amount of talent or anything like that, but these guys have been able to come together. You've had Jalen Moore be able to sell a job. He had 18 points yesterday. This guy I thought was really going to ascend in Milos Uzan, and he really hasn't delivered too much for the team. He's only averaging right around 7 points per contest, but they're finding a way to win games with the likes of a Javion McCollum stepping up, being able to give the team a double-figure amount of points per game. Sam Godwin, who was a little bit of an afterthought after transferring in from Wofford last season. This year, he's been able to do a much better job down low for the team. Latrey Dothard is able to pop some threes as well, despite the fact that they went 4 of 20 from distance yesterday. They got the job done, but playing up against a USC team that has the likes of Isaiah Collier, who's able to give you a triple-double on any given night. He's got that sort of ability. You've got a lot of just size down low. USC, a top 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage a season ago, I think is going to be very big. And getting back Boogie Ellis, who's out with a little bit of injury, big as well. He went 4 of 10 from 3 in the game yesterday. You've got Joshua Morgan, who he had 10 blocks yesterday. I don't think he's going to be getting 10 blocks again, but this guy's been absolutely tremendous down low, as overall for the season, he has been able to give you right around about 3.5 to 4 blocks per contest. You've been able to have Kobe Johnson come to the forefront as well. Vincent Iwuchukwu coming back from injury. That's something that has been helpful for the team as well. I think that you've just got a little bit too much depth down low for USC, and I think that this team is getting healthy at the right time after when they took that loss to UC Irvine. They were just dealing with a bunch of ailments. So 3 or less is my number here. 2.5 or less going to be willing to lay it with USC. 3.5 or higher, take the points with Oklahoma, and then 140.5 or less, take a look at the over. 141.5 or higher, take a look at the under. These are two teams that are a little bit slower with regards to their tempo. 865, 866 on the betting board. UT Rio Grande Valley is going to be playing against Hawaii. This is from Palm Springs, California, and with Hawaii, they're between 10 and 11-point favorites. Your total is between 149.5 and 150.5, and with Hawaii, I did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points, so at 11 or higher, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Grand Valley. Grand Valley, a little bit of a work-in-progress team, certainly not a team that's doing a supreme job defensively, but I do think that they are going to be able to give Hawaii a little bit of fit, and with Hawaii, we always notice that this team is not quite the same team when they are away from the island. I do like the way that Hawaii has been able to assemble this offense defense, bringing in Justin McCoy, a former top 150 recruit from UNC, is something that is going to be able to help out this team. 6'8", a little bit of a combo player that's currently shooting north of 41% from three-point range. Juan Munoz, I believe, is, by the way, in like his 25th year of college basketball. I mean, this guy, pretty ancient after he began his career over at Longwood, career 38.5% three-point shooter, finally healthy for this team. And then Mo Sek has been able to do a solid job down low. I remember when he got a few starts a season ago when Bernardo da Silva was dealing with injury. He was really able to step up there. That's going to be tough for Grand Valley to be able to match up with, but you do have Aaron Freeman, who's able to give you 6 boards per contest. Elijah Elliott has been able to do a nice job coming in from Mount St. Mary's. He's been the main guy for this backcourt, 18 points, 2.5 steals per contest, and that's going to be a key for Grand Valley. Can they generate some turnovers? They're getting about 12.8 steals per game, but that was against lesser competition. They're not a great three-point shooting team at 27% from the outside, but Hawaii last year was one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, played a harebrained game against Iger to begin the season. Things got much more dialed back in that game against Northern Arizona, and for Grand Valley, they have been getting completely torched in their games against Division I competition. They played 3 games against D1 teams. They've allowed 88 plus in every one of them. Granted, 2 of those were against TCU and Oklahoma, though, so I do think that that's tough to be able to give a full representative sample of that, and I do think that Hawaii going to continue to be one of the slower teams in all of college basketball that allow UT Rio Grand Valley to just weasel their way into being able to cover this sort of a number, especially when you do have someone like a Hassan Abdul Hakim who's been able to come in from the non-Division I level, has stepped up, been able to give the team 8.5 points, 5.5 boards. You've got athletes for Grand Valley that I think are going to be able to hold them in this game. So going to be willing to take 11 or more with UT Rio Grand Valley. Set my number at 10.5, and with regards to this total, set mine at a 145.5. So also diving in on the under 867, 868 on the betting board. San Diego is going to be playing against Arkansas State up there in Palm Springs with Arkansas State. They're between 3.5 and 4-point favorites with your total between 152 and 153. And with regards to this total, I set mine at a 155.5. I'm going in on the over. San Diego is one of the most brutal defenses in all of college basketball season ago, and they did nothing at all to be able to elevate it. Now, their offense isn't quite the same as it was a season ago when they had Eric Williams chucking in their threes, when you had Jaden Dallaire, even though he got injured midway through the season, being able to help out as well. But this is a San Diego team that is going to offer up a lot of opportunities for Arkansas State to be able to get some fast buckets, as they've been turning the ball over right around 15 times per contest, and that is part of the reason why I did set Arkansas State as a 5.5 point favorite. Going to be one to lay it. Brian Hodgson comes in from Alabama, where, as we know, at Alabama, they play super duper up-tempo, and this Arkansas State team is right now one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. You've got a pair of guys in Freddie Hicks, Taryn Todd, combining for north of 34 points per contest. DeAndre Dominguez was over at UMass this season ago at 6'9". He's been about a 37-38% three-point shooter over the last 2 seasons, and his team maintained a lot of the backcourt from a season ago. You bring back Caleb Fields, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest. Avery Phelps has been a little bit more of an afterthought after a season ago. He had 8 points, 2 assists, shot 39% from three-point range, but he brings his team a little bit of experience in the backcourt. You need a bit more down low because Dominguez, along with Freddie Hicks, are really the lone 2 guys. They're giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, but San Diego doesn't have a whole heck of a lot down low either. Their main rebounders right now, true freshman Kevin Patton, who's a 6'8", little bit of a wing player, and then Wayne McKinney III, he's been able to chuck in there about 15.5 points per contest, but I do think that for Arkansas State, they're just going to continue to run it and gun it. Arkansas State has allowed at least 81 points in every one of their games thus far this season. San Diego played a little bit of a slog against Navy. I think that speaks a lot more to what Navy is rather than San Diego actually being good on defense, and Arkansas State has had an uncanny ability to just be able to speed up games. I think that they're going to do so here, and that'll throw San Diego for a little bit of a loop. So I've set my total at 155.5. Going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Arkansas State. 869, 870, and 871, 872. I do have to project forward on. These are the games from lovely Las Vegas, and these games did not get done until past 11 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, so really hard to have any sort of numbers or anything like that, but I was thinking we would get Arizona State versus Vanderbilt and BYU versus NC State. I will try to highlight all the scenarios here, but if we do get Arizona State versus Vanderbilt, setting Arizona State a 3-point favorite with a total of 135. BYU versus NC State. NC State, 2-point underdogs, total of 154, but first things first, we'll hit upon Arizona State here, as I think they're the most likely team to lose, and with Arizona State, certainly has been a bunch that's done a solid job on defense. Problem is, their offense is outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. You've had Frankie Collins do an amazing job of being able to rip the ball away, and he's been giving out 4 assists per contest, 11.5 points per game, but he actually has more steals than assists at 4.7. He has been incredible with that regard, but who's able to put the ball in the basket basket for Arizona State. Should get a little bit better than what we've seen to begin the season, shooting 37% from the floor and 29% from three-point range, but it's a relatively rough shooting team. You've been able to get some good rebounding and just some overall rim protection out of Alonzo Gaffney, Sean Phillips Jr. These two guys have been able to play in tandem down low, with Phillips being able to give you 6 boards per contest. Gaffney is a little bit more of the eraser and is also logging right around 3 steals per game. And on the flip side, you've got a Vanderbilt team that has the better guard in terms of just being able to facilitate an Ezra Magnon. Magnon is able to give you 4 assists per contest, but there's just been a whole lot of, shall we say, mystery injuries with regards to Vanderbilt. It seems like Tyron Lawrence is still a far ways away from being able to come back. I do have to record this prior to the end of that Vanderbilt versus NC State game, but we haven't seen anything from Lee Dort thus far this season as well. And then you've had to really rely upon Colin Smith to be the main rebounder for this team. He has been able to give you about 9.5 rebounds per game. Carter Lang, as a true freshman, has been able to step up a little bit as well down in the post, but for Vanderbilt, really the best offense has actually been able to get a offensive rebound. They're rebounding about 35.5% of their misses, which is why they have been able to score 74 plus points each of their last 3 games, entering into that game against NC State prior to that. And I do think that being able to have Tazos Kamateros, who comes over from South Dakota, being a 50% three-point shooter, is big for the team. Vanderbilt, they've been a lackluster defense entering into this tournament, ranking right around 192nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So this would be a situation of something's got to give. If you do get like Arizona State versus Vanderbilt, Arizona State would be a 3-point favorite with a total of 135. And then if you get Arizona State versus NC State, I'd be setting NC State more in the neighborhood of about I would say 5.5 point favorite, as NC State has been able to do a very solid job with their offense. And depending upon what we see, I might be willing to go up to 6, because NC State entering into the day on Thursday, top 10 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. That is a credit to what Michael O'Connell has been able to do for this team. He's not scoring a ton. He didn't at Stanford last year. Last year at Stanford, 5 points with 3 assists per contest. This year, 7 points with 4 assists per game. Doing a good job getting guys like Jaden Taylor, DJ Turn It Up Horn involved. These 2 guys both averaging 13 points per game entering into this tournament. For NC State, they were in the top 25 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis entering yesterday, despite the fact that they are only shooting about 31.5% from 3-point range, and that is because they just have good, clean offense. They're doing the little things like shooting 78% at the free throw line. You've been able to get good production down low of DJ Burns along with Mohamed Diarra. Diarra's giving you 10 rebounds per game. Burns right around 15 points per contest as well. So I think that would certainly be taking it out of Arizona State. And with regards to that total, I'd be setting more of a high 130s, probably like a 139-ish total, depending upon what we see on Thursday. And then if we do indeed get BYU versus NC State, the reason why I would set BYU as a little bit of a favorite is because I do like the overall pieces that you've got for the team. And it is a very veteran-laden team. Like Spencer Rogers, for example, he's been able to shoot throughout his career well north of 40% from 3-point range. He does a really good job of being able to lead this bunch. He's been able to give out a few assists. And then you got Jackson Robinson, who's been able to give you 15.5 points per contest. He's a nice little versatile piece. I think I called Spencer Robinson at first. I was trying to put the two together, but both of these guys do work in tandem in that backcourt. And then you've been able to have other pieces like a Dallin Hall, who a season ago, he was shooting about 36.5% from 3 with 7.5 points per contest, throwing out the ball a little bit. He's done a good job being able to utilize his role. Fusani Trayer down low is able to give you 6 boards. He's able to do a nice job matching up with someone like DJ Burns as well. Ali Atiki Ali has been able to do a solid job as a little bit of a designated defender, as BYU actually entered into this event in the top 5 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But also for BYU, they played San Diego State, good opponent, but also Houston Christian, Morgan State, and Southeast Louisiana. So lacking a little bit on that front, but for BYU versus NC State, I would be setting a high total. BYU has been incredibly efficient on the offensive side of things as well. So that'd be a total more around 154 with BYU being a 2-point favorite. And if for some reason you get BYU versus Vanderbilt, I would be setting old Vanderbilt as a pretty sizable underdog there of in the neighborhood of about, I would probably go 12 points even. And with regards to that total, that'd be one where I'd be setting it more in the very high 140s. I'd probably be leaning more towards like a 148, 149 or so. Vanderbilt certainly has been a little bit lackluster with their defense, but certainly leaving a little bit of something to be desired with their offense as well. So that takes care of both of the scenarios there. Sorry, I had to be a little bit wishy-washy, but hard to be able to project forward. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-591, 306-592. Bryant and Xavier do battle. Xavier, the home team, finds themselves as between 17.5 and 18-point favorites. Your total is between 144.5 and 145.5. And with Xavier, I set them at 17.5-point favorites. So being able to catch 18, I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Bryant. We saw Bryant have that nice game against FAU, and then they overcame Prosperity, and they were able to get the job done with a win and cover against Howard. So you like to see that. This is a Bryant team that has really cranked down their tempo as well. For Bryant, this was a team that under Jared Grosso, they were running it, they were gunning it, they were ripping it down your throat. Now this is a Bryant team that has allowed 61 points or fewer in all but one of their games against C1 competition thus far this season. You got Sharif Gross-Bollock. He's the main guy for this team. 18 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. And all in all, Bryant is shooting about 37.5% from three-point range. I would like to see them go a little bit further in their bench. Got some like a Miles Latimer that he was a very solid scorer back in the day when he was over at Stony Brook and Bucknell. I mean, the classic guy from St. Peter's, Doug Eater, he has not been seeing a lot of time either, but Rafael Pinzon, who comes in from St. John's, he's been a solid scorer with about 12 points per contest, and Earl Timberlake bringing Sexy back with right around 10 rebounds per game. Xavier does have the better athletes in this one, and Desmond Claude has become the main go-to scorer for the team with right around 16.5 points per contest, and it is a Xavier team that isn't shooting it great from three-point range, but they've got a little bit more depth than they had a season ago. Last year, you can tell that they didn't have a lot of depth, which is why it's hard to replace darn near everyone from a season ago, but Davion McKnight, once again, stuff in the stat sheet. Last season over at Western Kentucky, he had like 15 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. We've seen a fall off with regards to scoring, but still 4 boards, 4 assists, a little bit over a steal per contest. You've been looking to some of the men of mystery, most notably Gatis Nekamisa, who comes in from Lithuania to be able to elevate the team as well. He's shooting about 40% from three-point range, but being able to get 18, I think, is a little bit too steep. I like the way that Bryant has been playing much more slowly, much more defense-oriented. Did something to a 145.5. You still have a Xavier team that's going to look to push a little bit more tempo. They, too, have slowed down a little bit from a season ago, but I think that we're maybe reacting a little bit too much from a small sample size from two perennially up-tempo teams, so going to be taking a look at the 145 over. And with Xavier, set them at 17.5, so we'll take 18 with Bryant. 306-593, 306-594. It is Wake Forest, and they're going to be playing us to Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern finds themselves as a underdog of between 20 and 20.5 points. Your total on this game, it is between 146.5 and 147. I did set my total at a 154. I'm going to be diving in on the over with this Wake Forest team. They just have not played a lot of defense the last 2 years in general. Last year, they were just like the Casper the Friendly Ghost of the ACC. There was no defense to be had whatsoever, and they're going up against the Charleston Southern team that's got what it is. Charleston Southern, not necessarily known for their defense. Last season, they were one of the bottom teams in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are currently 350th thus far this season, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with Charleston Southern. Wake Forest has not been the same team without Damari Monsanto in the fold. He's a good three-point shooter that has been dealing with ailments, so that has been a little bit less than terrific for this team. Meanwhile, for Charleston Southern, while they do lose some of their key pieces from a season ago, they've actually done a nice job of being able to restock via the transfer portal. You've had R.J. Johnson be able to come back, give the team 17 points per contest, and Tajay Kelly, who was the top rebounder from a season ago, he's picked up right where he left off, 15 points, 7.5 boards per contest. But with DJ Patrick coming in from South Florida, being able to log 13.5 points per game after he was a big-time afterthought last 2 seasons, that has been helpful for a Charleston Southern team that a few years ago, they just weren't able to put the ball in the basket, but they were okay defensively. Feels like that's the opposite now. They're shooting 39.5% from three-point range, but they're just absolutely giving up bucket upon bucket. And for this Wake Forest bunch, I do think that Austin Carr and his 6'10" size and ability to be able to pop threes really going to take it out of a Charleston Southern team that just doesn't have a lot of size. Hunter Sallis has really been stepping up as a go-to scorer, shooting well above 40% from three-point range, 19 points per contest. And Cameron Hildreth, he is sort of a Swiss Army knife, do-it-all sort of player, along with Kevin Boopy Miller. These two guys are combined for 35 points, 7.5 boards, 7 assists. You've got Miller giving you a steal and a half per contest, so like what they're able to bring to the table. But you've got for Wake Forest, 4 guys averaging north of 15 points per contest. Nobody else averaging north of 4. So you've got a big divide there, and I do think that Charleston Southern actually has the bigger bedroth of scoring ability and just guys are able to put the ball in the basket. So being able to get 20, I'm going to be taking a look at the points. Don't think either team is playing a lot of defense, and neither team is super duper slow. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be taking the points for Charleston Southern. 306-595, 306-596. Lipscomb is going to be playing against UNC Asheville. This is out there in the country of Canada. With Lipscomb, they're between a 1-point favorite to a 1-point underdog. Totals between 154.5 and 155. 155.5. And with Lipscomb, I did set them as a 2.5-point underdog. I lean to UNC Asheville and the top player here in Mr. Drew Pember. Saying 6'10", he's able to bury threes, he's able to give you blocks. You need him to sell hot dogs at the hot dog stand. He'll do so. Last season, 20.5 points, 9 boards, 2.3 blocks on 37.5%. 3-point shooting has been a little bit down thus far this season, but I think that he's going to be able to pick it up. And for Lipscomb, they've been without Jacob Onyesovic, their top scorer from the season ago, all season. Now, they've gotten massive production out of Darren Boyd, who's been able to log a little bit over 20 points per contest. Began his career over at Georgetown College of the non-Division I level, and he has stepped in, been able to shoot 43.5% from three-point range. Lipscomb as a whole, currently shooting 41.5% from the outside. That's going to taper off a little bit in my opinion, and with Lipscomb, you have no rebounding whatsoever. Their top rebounder is Presbyterian transfer Owen McCormick with 3.6 rebounds per game. That's when Onyesovic is being really missed. You've got plenty of scoring. Will Pruitt is a little bit down from his 7 points per game from the season ago, but he's able to put the ball in the basket. You like AJ McGinnis. He's coming from Cincinnati. He's been able to give you double-figure amount of points per game. And for UNC Asheville, if you're fearful of something, it's the fact that last year in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they were in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball, but they certainly are going to be able to spearhead and win that battle down low. You've been able to have Toyaz Solomon come in. He's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per contest, and so don't call him maybe Fletcher Abey, give you 12 points. He's been a good 3-point shooter over the last 2 years for this team. You've got some good facilitation overall with this bunch as well, getting about 4 assists out of Evan Johnson. So I do take a look at this spot, especially with Caleb Burgess being a good pass first player in this NC Asheville backcourt as well. And I do think that they get the job done against a Lipscomb team with really nothing to speak of down low right now. I did set my total at 150.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I do think that the unfamiliar just sights with regards to this, and Lipscomb's ability to be able to generate a few steals is going to be able to hold this under, but I think Asheville wins from within, and they win this game outright on the money line. So going to be willing to lay the small number / take them there. 306-597, 306-598. Long Island is going to be playing against Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi finds themselves anywhere between 10 and 10.5 point favorites on a neutral court. This is a total that is anywhere between 153 and seeing as high as a 154.5. And with Long Island, I set them as 13-point underdogs. So I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Texas A&M Corpus Christi. It's certainly a work in progress team, but you want to know it's a big giant work in progress. The entire program of Long Island, ever since they went from being the Blackbirds to being the Sharks, they just have not been able to find their way. Maybe they need to change back the mascot, but that said, with Texas A&M Corpus Christi under the tutelage of a new coaching regime, they've been able to find their way a little bit with having it be a whole is greater than sum of its parts approach. You don't have a single guy that's currently averaging north of 10 points per contest, but you have a holdover from last season in Owen Dees, who's been able to shoot 40% from 3-point range, 6'8" combo player that gives a nice look to other opponents. Amir Paul has been able to do a nice job coming in from Nichols as well. He over at Nichols a season ago logged about 7 points, steal per contest. Corpus Christi last year, they were a team just like Nichols. They were looking to generate turnovers, and they're looking to do so this year as well. 11.2 steals per contest. They're still shooting relatively okay from 3-point range, mid-30s, 33% from 3-point range. And Marion Humphrey coming over from UT Arlington, where he was a part-time starter and was able to dole out the ball, has been big in terms of just having some camaraderie in that backcourt, something that Long Island doesn't really have, despite the fact that Rod Strickland, former NBA guard, has his 2 sons, and Ty and Terrell Strickland, in the backcourt. The 2 Stricklands have been able to combine for just under 18 points per contest. You're getting 58% 3-point shooting out of Terrell Strickland, along 3.8 assists per game. That certainly is going to be taking a little bit of a fall off, but for Long Island, they're playing at a fast tempo, getting up a lot of shots. They're just not good shots. They're shooting 36% from the floor. That's just absolutely terrible. RJ Green has been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. He's the only guy on the roster give you north of 5 boards per contest. Not like Corpus Christi is lighting the world on fire down low, but Gary Clark was able to give you about 7.5 boards coming over from Tarleton State, where he was a part-time starter. He's been able to elevate this team, and I just think that Long Island, staring at being one of the worst teams in all of college basketball, they play fast, but they play very inefficiently, and I do think that Corpus Christi going to be able to get some takeaways. I think that they're going to get some easy buckets. Set my total at 155, so going to be taking a look at the over. And in regards to the spread, I set Corpus Christi as a 13-point favorite from the great state of Kentucky, so going to be one to lay the number and going to be taking a look at this little over. 306-599, 306-600. We go North Carolina A&T and Alabama State. Neutral court game that finds Alabama State as a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite, and your totals between 151.5 and 152. And with Alabama State, I do think that they should be the favorite in this spot. I set them as a 4.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number with A&T. They're just really lacking anyone to be able to help out London Glasper. Glasper has been able to give you a little bit over 20 points per contest, but for A&T, nothing down low whatsoever. Right now, leading the team in rebounds is Evan Joyner with 4, and past Glasper, you don't have a single other guy that's giving you north of 8.8 points per contest. Kyle Duke has been able to do an okay job of helping out after he was more of a role player for the team last year. But keep in mind, North Carolina A&T, this is their 4th coach in about 5 years. They've just been a turnstile, so they haven't been able to get any sort of footing whatsoever. They haven't been able to keep guys in the program, and that's why they're currently shooting as a collective about 35.5% from the floor. They're actually not turning the ball over a ton, but just really bad shots in general. Meanwhile, for Alabama State, they're going to have the best player out there on the floor. That'd be TJ Madlock. Madlock, a stat sheet, suffered 14 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals. It's a Alabama State team that surrounds him with some good three-point shooting because he doesn't necessarily shoot it the best from three-point range as well. But now you've got Isaiah Range back in the fold after he missed the first 4 so games of the season. Last year, he shot 42% from 3, 14 points per contest. Deontay Bass has been a little bit in and out of the fold coming in from Georgetown. I think that he's probably going to be out for this game, but if you do get him, that's an added bonus. CJ Hines, though, he's been able to step up in the backcourt to being able to dole out 4 assists per game. And though Alabama State doesn't necessarily have ideal size themselves, they have been able to have just Stephen Walker be able to step up with about 4.5 rebounds per game, 6'10" gentleman that I don't think that North Carolina A&T is going to be able to match up with this A&T team. They've been rough on offense. They've been rough on defense. And for Alabama State, they are looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, but I do think that for Alabama State, they're going to do a nice job of holding down an A&T team that in 3 out of their last 5 games, dating back to last season, they have scored 61 points or fewer. I do think that these are 2 relatively awful offensive and defensive teams hooking up, and I do think that that'll lead to just a few more brick shots, but I think Alabama State going to be able to pull it out. 1 to lay up to 4 with Alabama State, semi-total 146, so going to be taking a look at the total under to go along with Alabama State. 306-601, 306-602. Ball State is going to be playing us to Arkansas Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff finds themselves as an underdog of 10 to 11 points, and your total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 154, and with Arkansas Pine Bluff, I did set them as an underdog of 7 points, so I'm going to be willing to take these points with Ball State. They just aren't the same team that they were a season ago. They lose a lot of their three-point shooting from a season ago, and we've got a Pine Bluff bunch that has really been able to do a nice job in these step-up games. They don't get the cover against Minnesota because Minnesota threw in there a 3 pretty much with 30 seconds remaining. That was a little bit of a heartbreaker, but for Pine Bluff, Kylan Milton, he's been able to do a tremendous job in the backcourt. Comes in from Western Kentucky, and he, along with Mr. Williams, Rashad Williams, who comes over from Oakland, have been able to combine for 41 points per contest. Williams always has a green light. The 12.7 threes per game he attempted during the 2020-21 season at Oakland, the most that we've seen from any player this millennium. Overall, Pine Bluff, they should see a fall off from this, but they're shooting 41% from three-point range, and they are facing off against a defense in Ball State that has not necessarily been too tremendous in recent years, especially with losing Peyton Sparks. So you've got Bashir Jihad, who's been really leading the way with about 15.5 points, 5.5 boards. Ismail Plight is able to give you a few rebounds for Arkansas Pine Bluff, and for Ball State, overall the team is shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, not turning it over a ton. I like with Jalen Anderson, who averaged about 9 points per contest over at Loyola Marymount, is bringing to the table along with Mikey Pearson Jr., who he last season shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, has good 6'7" size, but Ball State also really lacking a lot of depth, and Arkansas Pine Bluff has actually done a solid job of being able to surround Milton along with Williams, with a few guys who are able to step up, knock down some buckets. So this is a spot where I set my total at 149. You've got a Ball State team that is now outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. They've really slowed things down, so looking at the under and going to be able to take the points with Pine Bluff, set them at 7-point underdogs. 306-603, 306-604. Mississippi State plays us in Nichols. Nichols finds themselves as underdogs of between 25 and 26.5 points, between 136.5 and 138 is your total. And with Mississippi State, I did set them as an underdog with 22.5 points. Going to be looking to take the points with Nichols. And for Nichols, perhaps this is a team that you might want to be taking a look at in the first half and not so much the second half, because we saw them have that 20-point lead against LSU, very nearly blow that. I remember I had them in a game against Denver where they got up, I believe, 18 points, and they completely toilet bowled that game as well. So that was a little bit less than terrific, but overall, this Nichols team does have some ability. They've got Jamal West, who's been your main scorer with right around 18.5 points per contest. They lost their coach in Austin Clonch during the offseason, so they've had to undergo a little bit of a new style. And West, he's become the go-to guy. 6.5 boards, 3.8 assists. He's been really the main trigger man for this team, but we've also had Deontay Smith come in from TCU along with South Alabama. He's been able to step in, a career about 33% three-point shooter at 6'7", and he's lent some versatility with about 14 points per contest. Now, Mississippi State, they're just insert your really, really tight snake here in terms of just sucking the life out of teams with their defense. A top 10 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Ever since you have seen Chris Jans come over there, they have been having some questionable shooting, as overall they're shooting 32.5% from three, but it's much better than last year where they were 363rd out of 363 D1 teams in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. They get back Shaquille Moore, who he began the season a little bit injured. He's been able to give the team 8 points per contest thus far. You've had one double-figure scorer be able to hold it down in Josh Hubbard, who has come in as a freshman, and he's really been able to elevate this program. A little bit surprising that Andrew Taylor is only averaging right around 3 points per contest, but even with having Tolu Smith out of the fold, you still have Charles Matthews giving you about 7 boards per contest, G.J. Jeffries about 7 boards per game. Trey Ford was a very good junior college transfer that's been able to shoot about 37.5% from three. Mississippi State right around about 9 or so deep. I do think that they should be able to win this game comfortably, but I do think that this is a little bit too lofty of a number. Mississippi State is better with their offense than they are seasons ago, but they're not good enough to really be able to win by 25, 26, things like this on the regular. So I did set my line more around 22.5. Going to be taking a look at the points, and Nichols has a good way of being able to speed up games. I did set my total 144.5, so looking at the over and the points with Nichols 306, 605, 306, 606. Longwood is going to be playing us to Delaware St. Delaware St finds themselves as underdogs between 13 and 13.5 points. Between 140.5 and 141.5 is your total, and with Longwood, I did set them as a favorite of more around 12 points. So I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Delaware State. Delaware State was actually a really good cover team a season ago. They were just constantly catching like 15 or so points, and they continued to lose by 12 like every single day. It was absolutely hilarious, but with this Longwood team, I do think that they're going to be able to win the battle down low. You've got Christmas and Michael Christmas being able to give you 8 boards per contest, and they bring in a 7-footer, Simon Zapala. He comes over from Utah State, and he's been able to do a really solid job as well. 7.5 boards. He's able to give you nearly a block per contest. Been very impressed by the gentleman from Poland. You do have a trigger man in Waylon Napper, who's been able to give you 14 points, 5 boards, 4 assists. The one thing he really doesn't do is shoot threes. As Longwood, they've had success despite shooting 22% from three this season. That should be going northward. They're going to be a bad 3-point shooting team. They're not quite that bad, though. And then you take a look at the flip side for Delaware State, and you were expecting a little bit more in the beginning of the season for Martez Robinson, who last season was averaging about 11.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest, but it's kind of going the last 2 games with a combined 40 points. Their main guy thus far has been Javon Muniz, who's been able to give you 14.5 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but Delaware State last year struggled from 3-point range. They're struggling once again this year at 23.5%. The 16 turnovers per game, a little bit less than savory, but I do think that they're going to be able to do enough down low to be able to hold in there against the main 7-footer. You've got Wesley Oba, who comes over from the country of England, 5.5 boards out of him. Alson Andrews was a little bit of an afterthought at Illinois State. He's come in at 6'10", good size, 7 boards per contest, and I do think that this game becomes a little bit ugly. You've got a Longwood team that they do a tremendous job with their defense. Delaware State, they're a all over the place sort of team that I do think is going to be able to give you a relatively game effort, as with this Longwood team, they've done a nice job being able to hold each other last 3 opponents to 66 points or fewer. So it did set my total 140, diving in on the under, and at north of 12, going to be taking a look at the points with Delaware State 306, 607, 306, 608. Sam Ianford is going to be playing us Merrimack. Merrimack is between a 10.5 to an 11.5 point underdog, and your total is between 141.5 and 142. And with Merrimack, I did set them as a underdog of 10.5 points. So being able to get north of 11, going to be one thing the points with them. Jordan Dedcock has been dealing with a little bit of an injury for this Merrimack team, but all in all, you still have a bunch that does a good job with that amoeba zone, which I think could present some issues for Sanford. Sanford, they themselves do a good job generating steals. Right now, they're generating right around 11.5 per contest, but they're turning the ball over 13.5 times per game. So I do think that this game might be featuring turnovers as if it is Sarah Lee's Bakery. You've got Jermaine Marshall, who's been able to, for Sanford, give you 12 points per contest, shooting well north of 40% from 3-point range, but you tell the backcourt without Quez Glover from a season ago, it has been struggling a little bit. You've been able to get a little bit of production out of Garrett Hicks, comes in from Alabama. Alabama A&M, but not quite what he did at the SWAC level, where in 4 seasons there, 11 plus points per contest every single year, career about 35% three-point shooter. You're going to need to get him cranked up a little bit more. AJ Stanton-McCray, he's been able to do a solid job giving the team 9.5 points per game, but has never shot above 30% from three-point range. Meanwhile, with the old Merrymen, been able to get nice production with Davon Savage being able to give you 11.5 points, 5 boards per contest. The good news for Durcock, there's a chance that he might be able to play in this game. He was able to see a few minutes in that game against North Carolina A&T, and that does lean you a little bit more towards the Merrimack side, at the very least for me. Samba Diallo, he comes in after he was over at UMass along with Manhattan to begin his career. He's done a nice job fitting into the system, as well as you've been able to have him give you a steal, about 5 rebounds per game, which is something that Merrimack has been lacking the last few seasons. And then the freshman and Adam Clark, how about what he's been able to do with about 3.5 steals, 13.5 points per contest. He has been a tremendous spark plug for a Merrimack team that did lose quite a bit of their backcourt from a season ago. Merrimack shooting only about 27% from three-point range themselves, so it is a interesting ordeal. Sanford likes to play up-tempo, Merrimack likes to play slow, but I do think that Merrimack gets this game played a little bit more at their level, and getting north of 11, good to be taking a look at the points with the old Merrymen to go along with the under. 306-609, 306-610. You've got Robert Morris, and they're going to be playing against Jacksonville. Jacksonville, a 3 to 3.5 point underdog, totals between 133 and 133.5, and with Jacksonville, I did set them as a underdog of 4 points. So here between the 3 to 3.5, not going to be one to lay anything more than that, but going to be one to lay that number with Jacksonville. It is a team that has been playing very slowly over the last few seasons, going up against a Robert Morris team that they themselves are not really looking to crank up the tempo, and for Robert Morris, they are in a little bit of transition after losing their do-it-all player in Enoch Cheeks from a season ago, but I do like what this team was able to do via the transfer portal. They bring in a former top 200 transfer that's been able to give you 16 points per game in Justice Williams. He was a top 200 guy, I should say, in terms of the freshman class, more in that 2021 class, and he's been able to do a nice job with his versatility with about 3.5 assists per contest. Never has been a great three-point shooter, but Robert Morris does surround him with a few guys that are able to pop it and drop it from three-point range, as TJ Wainwright, he's been able to shoot about 46.5% from distance. You've been able to have Marquise Hastings come in, give you 12.5 points, 9.5 boards, and he's shooting 46% from three. Should see a little bit of a fall off there, but you also have Stephon Walker's able to give you some rebounds as well. And for Jacksonville, this team has been built mostly down low in their successful seasons, the last few seasons. Bryce Workman has been able to give you about 7.5 boards per contest, but do have your question marks with regards to this backcourt, as they do lose a lot of the pieces that have been able to make things work the last few seasons. Kavion Nolan being out of the fold, that has meant that Robert McCray V has had to step up. He's been able to give the team 15 points, and is currently shooting about 45% from three-point range. Jacksonville as a whole, though, they're shooting 27% from the outside. They're turning the ball over 15.5 times per contest, despite the fact that they're not necessarily an up-tempo team. And Jarius Cook, who 2 seasons ago over at North Dakota State was logging right around 8.5 points per contest, shooting 40% from three. His lack of development with Jacksonville has really been costing them. So I do think that this is going to be a slow down, little bit of a grimy game. Set my total 132, diving in on the under. But with Robert Morris, I do think that they do a good job down low, and I do think that they have the better guard play in this one to be able to get the cover, willing to lay up to 3.5 with Robert Morris. And going to be taking a look at this total under 306-611, 306-612. Penn, the Quakers, are going to be playing against Lafayette. Lafayette is between a 12.5 to a 13-point underdog. Totals anywhere between 133 and 133.5. And with Lafayette, I set this total at a 129. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Lafayette, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball last season, and for Penn, they are in a little bit of transition after they lost Jordan Dingle, one of the top scorers in all of college basketball from a season ago. Now, credit where credit is due. Penn was able to get that big win against Villanova about a week or so ago, and then after they had that success, Penn proceeds to lose on the road against Maryland Eastern Shore in overtime. So it's been the best of times and the worst of times. Clark Slazier, he is going to be the best scorer in this game. He's on the side of Penn, right around 19 points, 3 assists per contest, but Penn feels like they're a little bit inconsistent with their offense right now, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but 16 turnovers per game. Got Nick Spinoso down low, has been able to give you 7 boards per contest, and I do like what Tyler Perkins, the true freshman, has been able to do. 15 points, 7.5 boards. He's someone that right around 6'5", is able to let it fly from three-point range, but for Lafayette, despite the fact that they did lose a lot of heart and soul pieces from a season ago, guys like Leo O'Boyle, CJ Fulton, deciding that they would transfer elsewhere, certainly was a little bit of a hindrance to the team. You got 7-footer Justin Vanderbond, who should be able to control things down low. has been a little bit lazy on the glass throughout his career, but he is able to give you right around 2.5 blocks per contest, and then you've been able to have Kyle Jenkins really step up for this team as well. Last season, he was able to log about 9.5 points per contest. Has never been a great three-point shooter, but is able to give you right around about 2 assists per contest. It's a Lafayette team that they're going through a little bit of regime change, but things are very much staying the same as they've been inefficient on offense. 28% three-point shooting team, 14.5 turnovers per game, but I do think that they're going to be able to get a bit more moving forward out of Devin Hines. Devin Hines, a season ago, he was a little bit of an afterthought after 2 years ago. Looked like he was going to be able to bust out, be able to give this team a little bit more, and with Lafayette, I do think that they're going to be able to stay relatively snug in this game because I think that they're going to slow this thing down to a crawl, make this very, very ugly against a Penn team that has been a bit inconsistent without Jordan Dingle in the fold. So it is a spot where I set this line at 9. I think that Lafayette executes their slow, grimy style, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Lafayette, set them as a 9-point underdog. 306-613, 306-614. Lamar and Bethune-Cookman are going to be doing battle, with Lamar being a 2 to 3 point favorite, and your total between 145 and 146, and with Lamar, set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Here between a 2 and a 3, I would rather lay a 2 rather than take a 3. I've actually been quite impressed by this Lamar team. They bring back pretty much 4 other top 6 scorers from a season ago, and with Lamar, they've been able to get some good production in the backcourt with Jashawn Jackson being able to do a good job of being able to facilitate the ball. 10 points, 3.5 assists to less than a turnover per game. He's really taken some strides forward after a season ago. He was a little bit of an afterthought over at Abilene Christian. This is, by the way, going to be a game out there in the great state of Virginia. And for Bethune-Cookman, you've got the star power up front. Zion Harmon has been able to log 20 points per contest, former top 150 recruit that has been able to shoot about 34.5% from three-point range. And for Bethune-Cookman, they do a good job of generating steals. This is going to see a fall off, though. They're right now averaging 17.3 of them, with Damani McIntyre averaging 4.8 steals and 4.5 points per game. He is literally getting more steals than points per game. That is going to be something that should be going downward a little bit, but can they just get Derek Carter Hollinger Jr. out there on the floor? He has been just inconsistent and banged up throughout the last few seasons. Finally made his debut against Charleston Southern, someone that 2 seasons ago over at Montana was able to shoot 44% from 3 as a 6'6" combo player. He can really elevate the seam, but has been dealing with a lot. Meanwhile, for Lamar, you should be able to have them win this game down low. Adam Hamilton, who was limited less than 10 games last season, he's back down low. He's been able to give the team 9 boards per contest. You also had Valentin Kott be a little bit banged up. He's been able to do a solid job with his rim protection, being able to offer a little bit of defense as well. And then you're able to throw on there the fact that you've got about 12 points, 3.5 assists out of Scary Terry Anderson, who he a season ago was able to ascend, shoot 39% from 3 at 6'6". He's able to be very versatile, and I think that versatility is going to take it out of a Bethune-Cookman team that, while they're 3-1, the only D1 opponent that they knocked off is Charleston Southern, and the games against non-Division I teams have very much padded their numbers. So I did set my total at a 146.5. I'm looking at the over. Bethune-Cookman looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo this season, and with Lamar willing to lay up to 2 with them. 306-615, 306-616. Troy is going to be playing against Grambling. Grambling is an underdog of between 9.5 and 10.5 points. 140.5 to 141 is your total, and with Grambling, I set them as 8-point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to take the points. You've got a Troy team that does lose quite a bit from that bunch that was able to do a solid job on defense last season. You've got Christian Eugene, who is a double-figure scorer from a season ago. He's able to give you a little bit of facilitation going up against a Grambling team that they lost a lot of their pieces from. A defense that a season ago was in the top 10 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Clearly not that this season, as they have given up 86 points to Sam Houston State and Iowa State to 92 in their last 2 games, but they do have some veterans in the backcourt, including Trey Michael Morton. He's been able to give you 12 points, 3.5 assists per contest. You've got a bunch in general in Grambling that's shooting only about 20.5% from 3-point range, and Katari Gordon being out full, that does hurt this team as he was very good down low. But you've got Jonathan Akou, the former CFF Austin standout. He's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest. He's really the only guy that's giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. That's a little bit of an issue, but Troy doesn't necessarily have a ton down low themselves. They lose a lot of their top rebounders from a season ago. Christian Eugene has had to step up as one of their top rebounders with right around 5.5 boards per contest. Like what I've seen out of Marcus Rigsby Jr., he's come in, he's been able to give the team right around 8 points per contest, was a very highly touted non-Division I transfer who's been able to shoot about 36% from 3-point range. And then Thomas Dowd, Dayton Conroy, these two guys shooting north of 40% from three for a Troy team that is shooting about 32% from three, but what is killing them is just all those backcourt pieces that they lost from a season ago has caused them to be inconsistent in the way that they take care of the ball, as they've been turning it over 17.5 times per contest. Amir Muhammad is back from a season ago when he was able to log about 10 points per contest, but I do think that Grambling going to be able to kick it up a little bit more on defense. The fact that they're going to be able to do a solid job down low should be able to keep them lively. I'm going to be able to take anything north of 8 with Grambling, and with this total, set mine at a 140, so also diving in on the under. 306, 617, 306, 618. You've got Georgia playing us with Winthrop. Winthrop is an underdog between 8.5 to 9 points, and your totals between 145.5 and 146.5. With Georgia, I did set them as favorites of 8.5 points, so being able to get 9, I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Winthrop. Winthrop has been one of the top teams with regards to points scored on a per possession basis over the last few seasons, and for Georgia, I really just don't like what I'm seeing out of this team. They do bring in Noah Thomason, who he was over at Niagara, averaging 19 points per contest in one of the slowest systems in all of college basketball a season ago, and he's been able to do a solid job in concert with Jabir Abdul-Rahim. These two guys able to give you about 26.5 points per contest, but it's the Georgia team shooting 29.5% from three-point range. RJ Melendez is one of those guys that really doesn't do anything well. He does a lot of just stuff in general. He's been able to give you a steal and a half per contest, but I don't know what his value is out there on the court. And for Winthrop, they do need to get a little bit more rebounding. Alex Zimmerman from the Racket Bus and Bucknell Bison leading the way with 5 rebounds per contest, as we have seen Kelton Talford just not be the same down low after last season. He had 16 points, 8 boards per contest, only about 3.5 rebounds per game. I do think that that'll be cranking up a little bit, but got good shooting to be able to hold in this game. Sincere McMahon along with Kassan Harrison both shot north of 35% from 3 a season ago, with Harrison shooting north of 44% from 3-point range. Currently, they're combined to average about 19.5 points per game. I think that that's going to be kicking up a little bit, but also getting KJ Doucette going. He comes in from Fort Valley College. He's been a non-Division I transfer. He's come in and given the team 12 points per contest, and Winthrop has really struck gold with a lot of those non-Division I transfers. He's been a big addition as well. Winthrop, I think, has just as much depth as Georgia, and I do think that they're going to be able to kick things up a little bit more with regards to their post play, with Georgia having really Russell Chewa and not a lot else down low. So I'm going to be willing to take 9 or more with Winthrop. Did some my total 148.5. Winthrop not necessarily an up-tempo team, but a very efficient offensive team that was also in the bottom 50 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. So looking at the over and going to be taking a look at the points with Winthrop. 306, 619, 306, 620. Alabama A&M and East Tennessee State do battle. East Tennessee State an 8.5 point favorite. Your total is anywhere between 143 and 144.5. And with East Tennessee, I did set them as 6.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alabama A&M. A&M does lose quite a bit from a season ago, but this team does have one of their key pieces back in Dallin Smith, who a season ago was able to give the team double figures. He's been a log right around 13 points per contest, and for Alabama A&M, they're turning the ball over 16 times per contest, so that's a little bit unsightly. You can tell that they are missing their big 7-footer from a season ago in Obiana Blaze Okanobi. He was able to be very solid for the team, but at the same time for ETSU, while they do have Jaden Seymour being able to give you 8 rebounds per game, and they do have quite a bit of size. Jaden Parker comes in from North Florida. He's been able to give you 6 boards, a little bit north of 2 blocks per game. It is a bunch in ETSU that they are turning the ball over 15 times a game, shooting less than 40% from the floor. Always liked a good Peterson, Kamari Peterson. He's been able to do a solid job being able to give the team right around 15 points per contest. Was a little bit of an afterthought over at Indiana State. And Anibi Asamoah has been able to give you right around 15.5 points per game. He's shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, but these are really the lone 2 guys that have been able to do a solid job there. And for this ETSU team, they really don't have a lot of depth as well. They do have guys that are giving you like 11, 12 minutes per game, but they're not really contributing in any way, shape, or form. And for Alabama A&M, while outside of Smith, you don't necessarily have top flight talent. You've got pretty much 10 to 11 guys that are seeing at least 12 minutes per contest. And I do think that Omari Peak, who comes in and after last season he was able to give the team 6 points per contest, I think that he's going to be able to do a solid job helping the team out as well. So I did set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alabama A&M, with the fact that ETSU has struggled with their backcourt. I did set my total 144.5. Alabama A&M has really been looking to crank up their tempo, and defense has been a little bit suspect. Meanwhile, ETSU, they have been able to get to at least 70 points in 3 out of their last 4 games. So going to be taking a look at the over and the points with Alabama A&M. 306-521, 306-622. It is Fairfield, and the Sags, they are going to be playing us New Hampshire. New Hampshire finds themselves as anywhere between a 1-point favorite to a 1-point underdog, and your total on this game, it is between 142 and 143. It is very clear that the Sags are looking to play quite a bit more up-tempo this year than they did a season ago, but I do think that this game is going to be slowed down a little bit by the way that New Hampshire plays as well, but I do think that Fairfield pulls it out. I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Fairfield went through a lot during the offseason. They lost their coach in Jay Young pretty much 3 weeks before the season, and they're still without Alexis Yetna, star-studded player that is dealing with an injury, but it's going to be all about does the backcourt win out or the frontcourt win out, because Clarence Daniels, he has been a dominator down low for New Hampshire. He's been able to do a nice job being able to log right around 20 points, 8 boards per contest, and he's able to shoot right around 40% from 3 as a 6'6", a little bit of a combo player. And then Ahmad Robinson has come in to be able to give this team a little bit more facilitation in the backcourt. Was at the non-Division I level a season ago, 16 points, 5 assists. But for Fairfield, Bryson Gudine, former top 200 recruit of Syracuse, has been able to shoot 45.5% from 3, 17 points per game. Caleb Fields is back from a season ago, began his career at Bowling Green, who's been able to do a nice job being able to give the team a little bit of facilitation, being able to chip in there a double-figure amount of points per game. And then you do have some upside guys, like a James John Jr. was a former 3-star guy that he's still looking to find his way a little bit, but I do think that there's a little bit of upside there. Fairfield has been turning the ball over 13.5 times per game, and losing Supreme Cook from a season ago has been hurting the team. But you also have a New Hampshire team that, in terms of guarding the 3-point arc, they've been one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball. You've got a little bit more down low with Trey Woodyard along Jackson Baker being able to combine for a little bit over 11 rebounds per game. Baker began his career at Central Arkansas, where he was relatively solid down low, and he's got some versatility. Career about 32.5% 3-point shooter at 6'8", but I do think that it's going to be a little bit difficult for New Hampshire to go on the road, get this one done. I do think that Gudine and the backcourt going to be able to lead Fairfield to victory in this one, so I did set Fairfield as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Fairfield after they tried to crank up their tempo to begin the season. I feel like they're starting to go a little bit more slowly as they have given up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 3 games, and this is a New Hampshire bunch. I think that they're going to be looking to dial it back as well, looking at the under and going to be taking a look at Fairfield as a slight favorite / a slight underdog. 306-623, 306-624. It is Providence, and they're going to be playing host to Lehigh. Lehigh is an 18.5 to a 19-point underdog. Totals between 143 and 144. For Providence, I did set them as a 16.5-point favorite. So here at 18.5 to 19, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Lehigh. This bunch has been able to do a very solid job just in terms of finding ways to be able to get Tyler Whitney Sidney the ball, who is a double-figure scorer a season ago. He is a little bit inconsistent with his shot in general, but he's been able to do a good job along with Keith Higgins of just being able to lead this offense with a combined 29.5 points per contest. Higgins has been able to shoot about 34.5% for 3, and they're combining for 4 steals per game. Lehigh, a little bit over 8 steals per game. As a collective, that has been a nice find for this team. And then Dominic Parolin, who's been a little bit inconsistent down low throughout his career. He's logging about 7.5 rebounds per game, going up against Providence bunch that, without question, Bryce Hopkins is going to be the best player out there on the floor. He's been able to log 13 points, 8 boards. He's not been shooting well from 3-point range this season, but last season was shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. For Providence as a whole, they're shooting 30% from 3, and it should be cranked northward a little bit. But one thing I've noticed under this Kim English system is that the team is not taking the world's greatest care of the ball. 15.5 turnovers per game. I feel like they're really missing Jared Bynum right now, as they've been putting the ball in the hands of Devin Carter a lot, and he has been turning it over a lot. He and Bryce Hopkins, north of 7 turnovers per contest. That's one of the highest amounts in all of college basketball. You've been dealing with the suspension of Gary Duell, as well as, I believe it is Mr. Jaden Pierre. These two guys, they are averaging about 6.5 points per contest. I don't think it's going to be a big loss if they're out once again, so do want to be monitoring that status. But I do think that with Lehigh having the guys in the backcourt that they do, with Parolin being able to step up as well, they should be able to hold in this game. And I do think that it is a game that's going to be a little bit more up-tempo. We've seen Lehigh be a mid-tempo team, and I do think that Providence going to be able to get a little bit more with regards to their 3-point shooting in this one as well. And as a matter of fact, for Lehigh, I want to take a look at this defense. They have given up at least 74 points in each of their last 3 games against D1 competition. So good to be taking a look at the over and the points with Lehigh. 306-625, 306-626. You've got Clemson, and they're going to be playing us Alcorn St. Alcorn St finds themselves as underdogs of 22 to 22.5 points, between 147.5 and 148 is your total. And with Clemson, I did set them as a 21.5 point favorite. So being able to get 22 plus here with Alcorn St, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Clemson. They have been able to do a very solid job of being able to execute on offense, and the defense feels like it's a little bit better than it was a season ago. I still do have some question marks on that front, but this is a Clemson team that has been able to have PJ BJ Hall just really going to flamethrower mode, 19.5 points, 6.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, going up against an Alcorn St team that all of a sudden, Jeremiah Kendall, he's been able to do a great job with 17 points, 8 boards. Not a guy that's going to give you versatility, and Alcorn St has struggled a lot with their three-point shooting over the last few seasons. They're shooting 31% from three. That's par for the course for them, but you've had Decron Thornton along with Jeremiah Graham-Bell. They've been able to do a nice job in the backcourt, combining for about 18.5 points per contest, while Byron Joshua has been really one of the main trigger men with about 3.3 assists per game. Joe Girard, he's a solid shooter that has been able to give out 3.5 assists per game for this Clemson bunch coming over from Syracuse. He's been a nice pop on offense, and for Clemson, this has been a team that needs a little bit more down low because BJ Hall has been the main guy. They lose Ben Middlebrooks from a season ago, but you've been able to have Ian Sheffelin be able to do a nice job of being able to gel in with this team with about 6.5 rebounds per game at Clemson, shooting 40% from three, which I don't think we're going to see a massive fall off from, but Clemson also plays at a pretty slow, pretty grimy style, and for Alcorn St, I do think that they're going to be able to force just a few turnovers to be able to remain in this game, as for Alcorn St, they're averaging right around 8.5 steals per contest, and they're typically able to go 8+ deep. So I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Alcorn St, set them as an underdog of 21.5, and set my total 143.5, also going in on the under. 306-627, 306-628. LSU is going to be playing us in North Florida. North Florida is an underdog between 19 to 19.5 points. Totals between 146.5 and 147.5. And with LSU, I did set them as a favorite of 17 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with North Florida. LSU just been all over the place thus far this season. They did not have Jalen Cook be able to get immediately eligible, which has thrown that backcourt for a little bit of a loop. That's a big reason why you've been having guys like Jordan Wright trying to dole out the ball, as LSU does not have a single guy on the roster that's averaging north of 2 assists per game, and that's really been their undoing. LSU is actually shooting 38% from three-point range. 7-footer Will Baker, he's able to pop three, 16 points, 6 boards, 50% from three, but sometimes there's a little bit of a liability on defense. Derek Fountain has been able to do a nice job as a little bit more of a rim protector, and then Jordan Wright, who comes in from Vanderbilt, has been able to give you about 11 points per contest as well, but I do think that North Florida going to be able to do a solid job with having a lot of weapons in the backcourt and having a lot of size in the backcourt as well. Someone like Dorian James, who's 6'7", he's been able to do a nice job, 10.5 points, 6.5 boards, not a great three-point shooter, but you've got 6'9" Jake Vanderheiden, who comes over from Bucknell. He last season shot about 30.5% from three after 2 seasons ago. That was more like 40% from three. Looks like he's getting back to form. Currently shooting 50% from three. Should see a little bit of a fall off there, but all in all for his career, about a 38% three-point shooter with some size, and then been able to get about 17.5 points per game out of Chaz Lanier, who's been able to give you about 6 boards. He stands right around 6'4". I think that that's going to be a little bit tough for LSU to match up with, and for North Florida, they do a solid job taking care of the ball. About 11.5 turnovers per game, so that's been relatively solid for a team that does look to crank up the tempo quite a bit more. And for LSU, this team has been a relatively solid defensive team. It's between a 146.5 and a 147 with the total. I set mine at a 147. Personally, with this North Florida tempo, I'd rather take the over on 146.5 rather than the under, so I'm looking there. Of North Florida, set them as a 17-point underdog, so looking at the points. 306-629, 306-630. Oklahoma State plays us to Houston Christian. Houston Christian finds themselves as underdogs of between 25.5 and 27 points. Totals between 149.5 and 150.5. And with Oklahoma State, I did set them as a favorite of 26 points. So being able to get 27, that is my buy point on Houston Christian, as Houston Christian has been absolutely brutal. One of the worst defensive teams in all of college basketball. But for Houston Christian, I do think that they're going to be able to do enough scoring to hold in there against an Oklahoma State team that really hasn't been able to elevate over the last few seasons under Mike Boynton. Maybe it's just me, but it has been a case where he has been having his issues, to say the least, getting the most out of his team. You've got Javon Small, who has come up big after coming over from East Carolina, 16 points, 5.5 boards, 5 assists. It's a lot of what he did at East Carolina a season ago. And Oklahoma State, an improved three-point shooting team from a season ago. Season ago, they were one of the worst teams in all of college basketball from distance. You've got Bryce Thompson, who's been able to shoot 50% from three. That should be seeing a little bit of a fall-off, but they don't have as much down low with Moussa Cisse. Now being gone, Mike Marcia has been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, but they've been dealing with a lot of moving pieces. Thompson has missed a few games, so they've got a lot of injury concerns, which did have me dock this a little bit as well. And for the Houston Christian bunch, you've had Marcus Green come in and be able to log 16.5 points per contest after he began his career at Sacramento State. You've been able to have Boke Marong be able to do a solid job after he a season ago gave the team 13 points per contest at 6'10". He should be able to match up a little bit down low with this team. And then Mr. Alvarez, Jay Alvarez, has come in from the non-Division I level, and he's done a nice job giving the team 15 points at 6'5". He's not a guy that's going to go out there and pop threes. That's Houston Christian. They should see some positivity here. They're shooting 17% from three-point range. I'm not even kidding when I say that. Part of it is because Houston Christian in their 3 games this far this season, FIU, UTSA, BYU, they've had a little bit of a rough go of it there, but I do think that for Oklahoma State, this team just not really capable of being able to get those big giant blowouts. Oklahoma State, a little bit more of a defense-oriented team that really doesn't have a lot of size from a season ago. I did set my total 154. Certainly, we are seeing Houston Christian playing at one of the fastest tempos in all of college basketball once again. So looking at the over, and at 27, going to be one take the points with Houston Christian, 306, 631, 306, 632. Pacific is playing also Lemoyne. Lemoyne is an underdog, 13 to 13.5 points. Totals between 147 to 148.5. Set my line at 13.5. At 13, it's a max I'm willing to lay with Pacific, but I'm going to be willing to lay it with Lemoyne. Just a really rough outlook for this team in general, as for Lemoyne, you just don't have a lot of guys that have Division I experience, as you bring in Camden Cleary, who was over at Ball State, and he was a complete afterthought for them, and he's become one of the top scorers for the team, being able to give them a double-figure amount of points per game. And to the credit of Lemoyne, they're only turning the ball over about 11 to 12 times per contest, but they're just not getting good looks in general, going up against a Pacific team that they don't have any size whatsoever down low. Pacific does not have a single guy giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, but they're able to find some shooters, currently shooting 29.5% for 3. That should go up. Judson Martindale last season shot 40% for 3, shooting less than 30% thus far this season. You've been able to have Donovan Williams step up 13 points, shooting 38% from 3-point range. And Luson Holmes, who comes over from South Carolina State, he's been able to give you about 6 points per contest last season, shot well above 35% from 3. It's not been the case thus far this season, but you also do have a nice pass first guard, and Tyler Beard, who's been able to give you 3 assists, so only about 1.8 turnovers per game. Pacific is going to need to clean up those 15 turnovers per game, and right now for Lemoyne, you don't have a lot of size either on this team. Luke Sutherland, one of their tallest guys at 6'7", only gives you right around 3 rebounds per game. They need him to get down low a little bit more. Other than Cleary, you don't have a single guy for Lemoyne giving you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, so that Achilles heel of Pacific is not going to be really exploited. And when it comes to just being able to develop offense, it's been very tough for this team. Mike DePriest, who comes in from IUPUI, has been able to give you about 6.5 points. He has been able to dole out 5 assists per game, but that said, with regards to this Lemoyne team, there's not really a lot to be able to dole out to, and I do think that Pacific, with the superior athletes and the superior shooting, going to be able to get it done. One to lay up to 13 with Pacific, and did set my total 149. I do think that Pacific against Lemoyne going to be able to clean up those turnover woes. So looking at the over and looking at Pacific, and we wrap things up with 306, 633, 306, 634. CSUN plays host to Mississippi Valley State. Mississippi Valley State is a underdog of 13.5 to 14 points. Your totals between 139 to 139.5. Did set my total at 143. Looking at the over, Mississippi Valley State probably not going to do a whole heck of a lot to be all about this total, but I do think that CSUN, a team that now under the tutelage of Andy Newman, who comes over from Cal State Bernardino, they are going to really be looking to crank up their tempo. We have seen that thus far this season, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be taking a look at the over. CSUN, they've been able to get to at least 70 points in every single one of their games thus far this season, and with CSUN, I did set them as a favorite of 15 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it, as you've got 2 main guys from the season ago, and Deontay Bostic along to Sean Ellen Aikens playing very well with one another, being able to combine for about 35 points per game. And with Newman, he did a good job of being able to maintain those guys while being able to bring in some non-Division I flair as well. Someone like Keontae Jones comes over with him from the Division II ranks. He's been able to give you 11.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest. It is a CSUN team that sometimes gets a little bit too reckless with 14.5 turnovers per game, but Mississippi Valley State, they're only generating right around 6 steals per contest. And for Mississippi Valley State, they've got really 1.5 scoring options right now. Raekwon Brown has been able to give you 14 points, 5 boards, and Donovan Sanders has stepped up a little bit more with about 11 points per game. But Mississippi Valley State, they're shooting 25.5% from 3, and typically when I see that, I think, they're going to see a little bit of a rebound there. Not so much with this team. Brown is the only guy giving them north of 3.2 rebounds per game, even though CSUN isn't necessarily the world's biggest team. With having Jones be able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, they should absolutely plow on the glass. And for CSUN, I do think that they should be able to get a bunch of easy looks at the bucket. Recognize that Mississippi Valley State has played a really rough first 5 games, but they have given up at least 80 points in every one of them. Hard to think that we're going to see otherwise here. I did set my total at 143, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over. And with CSUN, I did set them as a 15-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And then we do have one additional game as well. I don't know if this is going to make the betting board or not, but I'll give you something real quick on it. It's Idaho versus UC San Diego. Currently, I'm not seeing any sort of a number on this or anything like that, but as long as we do get this game, I did set UC San Diego as an 8-point 3-point favorite with a total of 146. And with UC San Diego, I think the big key for this team is just having Bryce Pope continue to take over with 19.5 points per game, shooting 45.5% from three-point range. Francis Nworke has been able to do a solid job with his versatility, 15.5 points, 4 boards. And for Idaho, this team has just really not been able to get a lot going. Taryn Frank, who began his career over at TCU and Vanderbilt, has been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest. Julius Mims has been able to log about 6.5 rebounds per game, but that is about it for this bunch, and I'm going to keep this one relatively short because, like I said, I don't know if this is going to be a bettable game, but at a 7.5 or less, willing to lay it with UC San Diego, 8.5 or more, going to be willing to take the points with Idaho, and then 145.5 or less, going to be taking a look at the over, 146.5 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under, and that'll wrap things up for the Black Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you are able to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, coming at you guys every single day. You know, the college basketball season, that means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.